One minute, I was standing in my apartment, losing an argument with a broken air conditioner. The next, I was behind 5 men with wooden spears while 10 goblins hammered on an invisible wall. A silver timer floated over a stone altar. Protection remaining, 20,000, 58,041. That was how I learned 2 things about the Lord Realm. First, whoever designed its orientation program had no respect for a reasonable adjustment period. Second, I had apparently become a lord. The title sounded impressive until I looked at my territory. 3 leaning huts, 1 waist-high altar, patch of grass that appeared to have given up on life. If this was a kingdom, then my old apartment had been a luxury estate. The 5 men in front of me were labeled militia. Their uniforms consisted of undyed cloth, rope belts, and optimism they did not possess. I had tested their intelligence exactly once. Guard the altar, then return to me, I had ordered. All 5 walked to the altar and stayed there. The second half of the instruction had apparently exceeded available memory. Outside the barrier, the goblins shrieked and struck the transparent surface with clubs. Every impact sent a pale ripple through the air. The shield held, but watching ugly green creatures test the only thing separating me from a blunt force death did not improve my mood. Then another panel appeared in front of me. Pernukul, Underpernul, Pretty Sefins, Tom and Bokowins, Nano Esef. Next cycle, 015D8, WSS. I stared at it. The goblins hit the barrier again. I stared harder, because that had always helped with unfamiliar technology. The talent description was short. I could spend points to evolve units of the matching species. More units generated more points at each 2-hour cycle. No listed ceiling. No materials. No helpful explanation of what evolve actually meant. Still, press this to make soldier better was the first part of my new situation that spoke fluent 0. I touched the nearest militia. White light ran from my fingers and swallowed him. His wooden shaft straightened and darkened into ironwood. The stone tip became a narrow steel blade. Leather armor formed over his chest, his shoulders broadened, and the empty uncertainty in his eyes sharpened into awareness. Militia evolved. Spearman. Is 2. The other 4 men looked at him with the same expressions they used for trees, rocks, and me. The spearman looked down at his new hands. Then he raised his head. Lord. It was only one word, but it was the first word anyone had spoken to me since the white light stole my apartment. You can talk. He considered that with visible effort. Can. Good enough. We were making progress. His status showed better strength, speed, memory, and 1 active skill. Thrust. The name would not win awards, but neither would hit Goblin very hard, and that was what I needed. I pointed at the creature currently licking the barrier. Use thrust on that one. The spearman stepped forward, planted his feet, lifted his weapon, and froze. The goblin stopped licking long enough to grin at him. Problem? I asked. He looked from the spear to the goblin. Do not know. You have the skill. Yes. But you don't know how to use it. Wes? I appreciated his honesty less than he probably hoped. The protection timer continued falling. 24 hours sounded generous when the system first announced it inside my head. It felt less generous with 10 enemies already memorizing my address. 1 goblin lifted a rock and hurled it. The stone struck the barrier near my face and bounced away. I still flinched hard enough to nearly fall over. The goblins loved that. Their laughter did something useful, though. It converted my fear into irritation. All right, I told the spearman. Forget the skill name. You have a longer weapon, better armor, and a wall they can't cross. Stay inside. Put the sharp end through anything that reaches for us. He absorbed every word. That alone made him a miracle compared with the militia. The goblins changed tactics. 3 stepped back, while the others spread along the barrier, probing for an opening. They were not geniuses, but they were learning, and that meant I needed to learn faster. I arranged the 4 militia in pairs. Simple orders only. Stand here. Aim there. Stab when I point. I repeated each command separately until their feet and spear tips were where I wanted them. The evolved spearman watched me organize them. What do I do? He asked. You make sure none of them get surrounded after we leave the barrier. He glanced at the goblins. Will we leave? I had not meant immediately, but saying no after he asked would have damaged my authority, which was currently held together by confident phrasing and the fact that nobody else could read the menus. That answer satisfied both of us. The goblins charged together. Clubs slammed into the barrier, rebounded, and threw the front line off balance. 4 militia thrust through the edge in 2 clumsy pairs. 1 spear scraped a shoulder. Another struck a goblin in the throat. The creature fell, choking, and the whole fight changed. These were not game pieces waiting for their health bars to empty. They were bodies. Vulnerable bodies. The evolved spearman moved before I gave another order. He drove his weapon through the wounded goblin, pulled it free, and pivoted toward the next. Pale light flickered along the spearhead. He stopped for half a heartbeat. So did I. Then he lunged. The light snapped down the shaft, his entire body aligned behind the point, and the spear punched through the barrier's edge and straight through a goblin's chest. The force lifted the creature off its feet and knocked 2 others backward. The system chimed. Skill comprehension achieved. thrust. The spearman stared at the body hanging from his weapon. "I know," he said. "Excellent. Keep knowing." It was not my finest speech, but it worked. The militia held the barrier while he moved along it, striking wherever the goblins clustered. I called targets and stopped him twice from stepping too far outside. He was stronger, smarter, and apparently born with a heroic impulse that would get him killed if I did not keep a hand on the leash. When only 4 goblins remained, they finally understood the arrangement was unfair. They turned and ran toward the trees. Letting them escape meant they could return after the shield disappeared. It also meant following them away for my only guaranteed safety. My mind offered 2 choices. My mouth chose before my courage caught up. Cut off their retreat. The spearman crossed the barrier at a sprint. I did not. Leadership required delegation. He struck the last goblin in the leg, ran past it, and turned to face the others. The militia shuffled after him in a line that was not quite a formation but showed ambition. Trapped between their pursuers and one increasingly confident spearman, the goblins lasted less than a minute. Silence settled over the clearing. The evolved soldier stood among 10 bodies, breathing hard. He looked back at me, waiting. The system had called him spearman. That no longer felt like enough. "Zuko," I said. He touched his chest. "Zuko, that's your name. You earned one." He bowed with awkward solemnity, as if I had granted him land instead of choosing 2 words under pressure. "Thank you, Lord." The dead goblins dissolved into drifting sparks. Fine gray crystals remained on the ground, along with a cloudy glass sphere. Soul dust acquired. .ss. Random recruitment orb acquired. SSTS. The timer above my altar read 23,003. Less than 8 minutes in Lord Realm, and I had discovered a power that could turn the weakest troops into real soldiers. I had also discovered that the power did not include instructions, courage, or common sense. Those, apparently, were my department. The first thing I did after surviving the goblins was check whether anyone else had received a manual. The global chat answered that question immediately. Thousands of messages raced past faster than I could read. Lords demanded explanations, offered money that no longer mattered, threatened a system that did not respond, and compared starter units like unhappy customers reviewing a terrible hotel. One person had slimes that kept absorbing his food. Another had wolves that refused to enter the huts. Someone claimed his goblins smelled so bad, he was considering sleeping outside the protection zone. Then a message appeared from a lord whose barrier had spawned beside a nest of red-eyed spiders. The joke stopped for almost 3 seconds. That was enough chat for me. My personal panel confirmed the 3 facts that apparently mattered now. Perfective worse, C, name 0. Title, Lord's Territory, unnames. I called the territory Haven. The name sounded hopeful, respectable, and far more established than the 3 shacks it represented. Zuko repeated it carefully. "Goh, Ven, exactly." He looked around our kingdom. I chose to interpret his silence as approval. The recruitment orb fit into a shallow groove on the altar. I added a small amount of soul dust, and the stone lit from below. Mist collected over it, hardened into bone, and deposited a knee-high skeleton holding a rusty sword. The skeleton stared at me through empty sockets. I stared back. "Can you understand me?" Its jaw opened and closed once. No sound came out. "Raise your right hand." It lifted the left. Promising. Unlocking a new species had given me 1 undead evolution point. I spent it immediately. White light surrounded the skeleton. Its frame lengthened, its bones thickened, and old iron plates locked over its ribs and shoulders. The rusty sword became a heavy cleaver. A dark blue flame appeared deep inside its chest, pulsing like a borrowed heartbeat. Skeleton evolved, skeleton warrior. Datwes. The warrior looked at the cleaver, then at Zuko, then slapped the flat of the blade against its own ribs. The resulting clang sounded pleased. "Daniel," I decided. "You look like a Daniel." He clicked his jaw rapidly. I'll assume that's enthusiastic consent. Daniel's skill was called Heavy Chop. Predictably, he had no idea how to use it. Zuko volunteered to teach him, although volunteered might be generous. I pointed at Zuko, pointed at Daniel, mimed a training swing, and Zuko treated the assignment like a sacred military responsibility. Watching a newly verbal spearman explain body mechanics to a skeleton without vocal cords made me feel better about my own qualifications. At least none of us could accuse the others of being experts. While they trained against a fallen goblin club, I examined the soul dust. The system identified it as currency, healing catalyst, leveling fuel, and construction power. 1 resource for 4 critical purposes. That was not convenient. That was a budgeting nightmare wearing sparkles. I gave Zuko enough dust to test leveling. The crystals dissolved into light beneath his skin, but his status did not change immediately. He sat cross-legged as if listening to something far away. Brax absorption in progress. So leveling consumed time. Evolution consumed points. Recruiting consumed soul dust and orbs. Nothing was free. My talent merely moved the bottleneck. Daniel solved his own problem before Zuko finished meditating. He raised the cleaver, dark light gathered along the edge, and he split a stump from crown to root. The weapon buried itself halfway into the ground. Daniel pulled. The cleaver did not move. He planted both feet and pulled harder. Zuko opened one eye, stood, and helped him free it. Daniel clacked his jaw in what I was beginning to recognize as laughter. Zuko tried not to smile and failed. They had known each other for less than an hour. Somehow, they already had a private language. I put that to work. The militia gathered branches and loose stone. Zuko organized them. Daniel cut trees because skeletons did not tire, complain, or ask why their lord was supervising from the shade. I was not avoiding labor. I was monitoring the next cycle. At least, that was what I planned to say if anyone developed enough intelligence to question me. When the timer reached 0, light pulsed through the altar. My human point pool increased by half a point. My undead point pool increased by 1/10. The totals matched the number of units I owned. I waited through another cycle to be certain. The same thing happened. Every 2 hours, each unit contributed a fraction of a point to its own species pool. More troops meant faster evolution. Faster evolution meant stronger troops, which meant more kills, more orbs, and even more troops. The talent was not a single upgrade. It was compound interest with weapons. I spent the new human points when the total reached 1, evolving another militia into a spearman. He emerged stronger and aware, but his speech came slowly and he needed Zuko to demonstrate thrust several times. "Name?" he asked after finally landing a proper strike. Zuko looked at me. Apparently, I had become the territory's naming department too. The new spearman repeated it, nodded once, and returned to practice. Zuko learned after one pressured attempt. Craig needed patience and repetition. Same evolution, different person. That distinction mattered more than the status panel suggested. With Zuko, Daniel, Craig, and 3 militia, I finally felt strong enough to scout beyond the clearing. The protection barrier covered the territory but not the surrounding forest. If food, water, or monsters were waiting nearby, I preferred to discover them while retreat remained an option. We went west first. The forest was full of enormous trees, waist-high ferns, and insects with no respect for personal space. Zuko led. Daniel walked beside him, occasionally tapping branches with his cleaver. Craig guarded the rear. I stayed in the center, where a lord belonged when he had no combat skills and a healthy appreciation for being alive. Less than 15 minutes from Haven, we found a grove of blue-skinned fruit. The system marked it edible. I made Zuko eat one anyway. He chewed, swallowed, and waited. "Good?" I asked. "Sour. Poison? No." An excellent review. We filled a rough sack. A black jackal burst from the brush on the way back. It targeted Daniel, perhaps because he looked like the easiest meal to digest. Zuko intercepted it with thrust. Daniel brought the cleaver down a moment later, and Craig finished the creature before it could stand. The fight lasted seconds. My panic lasted considerably longer. South of the territory, we found tracks from a pack of brown wolves. The system showed levels high enough to make me turn around without debate. East was worse. The undergrowth thinned, animal calls vanished, and the first creature we met attacked without warning. It resembled a hairless fox with black veins running beneath its skin. Zuko stabbed it through the shoulder. Instead of retreating, it dragged itself along the spear to reach him. Daniel removed its head. The next 2 monsters behaved the same way. No fear, no hesitation, no instinct to survive. Craig took a claw across his leather armor before we escaped. The cut was shallow, but it made the decision for me. Back to Haven. Zuko glanced east, unhappy to leave a threat unfinished. "We know enough," I said. "West has food, south has wolves, east has things too angry to die properly. Information is a victory when the alternative is becoming evidence." He considered that, then nodded. By dusk, we had dust, fruit, jackal meat, and no safe way to cook it. Lighting a fire beside an unprotected forest felt like sending invitations to every predator nearby, so dinner was fruit. Daniel watched the humans eat. I offered him a piece as a joke. He took it. The fruit fell through his ribs and landed on the ground. Daniel looked down. Zuko looked away, shoulders shaking. Daniel picked up the fruit and tried again. I stopped him before we wasted the entire supply on scientific research. Night brought 2 moons, one white and one faintly blue. It also brought the full meaning of the timer. Fewer than 16 hours remained before the barrier vanished. We dug a shallow ditch around the most exposed side of Haven and lined it with sharpened stakes. The militia could follow one-step instructions, so the work became an assembly line. Dig, carry, place, repeat. Daniel took first watch because he did not sleep. Zuko insisted on taking second. Craig volunteered for third after understanding what the word meant. I claimed the least damaged hut and called it the Lord's Manor. The roof leaked. The bed was straw, something scratched inside one wall. Still, for the first time since arriving, I had people outside who would wake me if monsters came. That mattered more than comfort. Just before sleep, I checked the global chat once. The panic had changed shape. Lords were no longer asking whether the world was real. They were asking how to find food, how to heal units, and what would happen when protection ended. Nobody knew. I closed the panel and listened to Zuko and Daniel training quietly beyond the hut. The next cycle arrived in 2 hours. The barrier ended in 16. For the first time in my life, time was making me stronger and hunting me at the same time. I woke to the sound of a tree falling. For one terrible second, I assumed something enormous was attacking. Then I stepped outside and found Daniel standing beside a fresh stump, cleaver over one shoulder, while Zuko supervised Craig's footwork. The militia had formed a neat row with bundles of wood. Either my army had spent the night improving itself, or I was still asleep and having an unusually administrative dream. Zuko approached with a report. His speech was clearer after leveling, though he still paused when searching for unfamiliar words. No monsters had entered the clearing. Daniel had expanded the eastern ditch. Craig had learned thrust. 2 militia had collected enough stone to repair the worst hut wall. Zuko had also tested how far the barrier extended and marked its boundary with stakes. You did all that while I slept? You ordered us to prepare. There was no accusation in his voice. That somehow made me feel guiltier. I checked their statuses. Zuko and Daniel had both gained a level. The cost for the next one had doubled, confirming that leveling would become slower while evolution remained my fastest path to quality. My human point pool was growing quickly. I could evolve the remaining militia, or save enough to push Zuko higher. 5 average soldiers would make the territory safer today. 1 exceptional commander might keep it alive tomorrow. I saved the points. With the shield expiring near midday, we used the final safe hours to scout north. Zuko, Daniel, and Craig came with me. The militia stayed behind to continue the ditch. The northern forest rose into rocky ground. We found a dark opening in a low hillside, its edges supported by weathered timbers. Scratches marked the soil outside, but they did not resemble animal tracks. They looked more like something heavy had been dragged into the cave. The entrance smelled of wet stone and old metal. Every adventure instinct I did not possess suggested treasure. Every survival instinct I valued suggested a confined space full of teeth. I marked the nearest tree and kept moving. Zuko looked back once. Later, I promised. He accepted that because he had already learned my definition of courage involved preparation and at least 2 escape routes. The sound of running water led us farther north. A broad river cut through the forest, clear enough to see stones on the bottom. The system identified it as fresh water, but I still had Zuko test it first. He raised an eyebrow. It was the first expression he had ever given me that felt unmistakably judgmental. You're tougher than I am, I explained. He said. He drank. I decided not to ask whether that agreement had referred to durability or character. The water was cold, clean, and easily the finest thing I had tasted in Lord Realm. We filled every container we had improvised. I even washed the goblin blood out of my clothes while the others cleaned their equipment downstream. That peaceful moment lasted until the brush exploded. A brown bear the size of a small carriage charged onto the bank. Its panel flashed above it. Ironhide bear. Level 5. 2 stars. It was stronger than anything we had fought, and already close enough that retreat meant turning our backs. Formation. Zuko moved in front of me. Craig took his right. Daniel braced on the left with his cleaver. The bear swiped before they were fully set. Zuko met the paw with thrust. The spearhead pierced the pad but failed to stop the swing. He released the weapon and ducked. Craig struck the same injured limb, driving his point deeper. Daniel stepped inside the bear's reach. Dark light covered his blade. The cleaver came down at the elbow and cut through hide, tendon, and bone. The severed paw hit the riverbank beside him. The bear roared and slammed its shoulder into Daniel, throwing him several meters. Blue fire flared between the skeleton's ribs as he rolled and rose. Zuko recovered his spear. Craig, eyes. It was the first tactical command I heard him give without looking to me. Craig fainted high. The bear snapped at his spear. Zuko came from the blind side and launched his full weight behind one precise thrust. The point entered the bear's eye. It drove deep enough that the creature collapsed before it finished roaring. Nobody moved for a moment. Then Daniel walked over, picked up the severed paw, and offered it to me. Thank you, I said. I've always wanted one of those. His jaw rattled. Zuko sat on a stone, breathing hard but smiling. Craig checked Daniel's ribs for damage even though he had no idea how to repair bone. The 3 of them had made decisions, protected one another, and killed a monster far above our starting strength. I had given only the first command. My units were not just becoming stronger, they were becoming a team. The bear dissolved and left the largest dust pile yet, a 2-star recruitment orb, and a glowing roll of parchment. Blueprint acquired, Arrow Tower. The structure could automatically attack enemies within range. It required wood, stone, iron, dust, and a territory without active protection. That last condition explained why it would not build when I tested it at Haven. I recruited from the 2-star orb instead. It produced another basic skeleton, which arrived without a skill and spent several seconds facing the wrong direction. Daniel tilted his skull. The new skeleton tilted its skull the other way. They continued until Zuko physically rotated the newcomer toward me. Haru, I named him. Haru raised one hand. It was the correct hand this time. Daniel clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to nearly disconnect it. We cooked bear meat over the first fire Zuko managed to start. By then, the territory had enough cleared ground and patrols that the smoke felt like a manageable risk. The meat had no seasoning and several parts I preferred not to identify, but after a day of sour fruit, it tasted like civilization. Daniel held out a hand. first and my cost. He held it closer. We ran this experiment yesterday. Zuko cut a tiny piece and placed it in Daniel's palm. Daniel dropped it through his ribs on purpose, then looked at me. Zuko laughed openly. The skeleton had developed comedy. I was not sure whether to feel proud or threatened. My human points finally reached the amount Zuko required. Before using them, I attempted what I believed was a clever exploit. I asked him to remove his armor and spear. If evolution supplied new equipment, perhaps I could keep the old set and double our gear. The required point cost increased. I put everything back. The cost returned to normal. The system had anticipated theft from itself, which felt personally insulting. White light enclosed Zuko for nearly a minute. When it faded, chain armor covered his body. A crested helmet sat under one arm, and his spear had become a polished weapon with a dark metal blade. He stood taller, his gaze steadier. Spearman evolved. Elite spearman. Is not. He spoke without hesitation. My lord, I understand much more now. The complete sentence struck me harder than the bear had struck Daniel. How much more? Zuko turned toward a training log, hooked the shaft beneath it, and activated his new skill. A burst of pale force launched the entire trunk into the air. He stepped under it and split it before it landed. That much, he said. The silver timer reached 0. The protection barrier vanished without sound. For a few seconds, nothing happened. No monster charge, no thunder, no dramatic announcement. Then the system spoke inside every mind in Haven. Begin true territory phase. A crystal appeared inside my hut. Beyond the eastern trees, something answered with a howl. Not a wolf, not anything I had heard before. Zuko lowered his new spear toward the sound. Daniel and Haru moved beside him. Craig took position at my back. I looked at the empty air where the barrier had been. The tutorial was over, and the forest knew it. The crystal inside my hut floated above the floor, bright enough to turn the cracked walls white. I touched it, and the system delivered the information it had apparently been saving for the exact moment my protection disappeared. The 30-day Lord trial was not only about keeping an altar intact. A corruption root had taken hold somewhere near every new territory. Its energy infected plants and animals, stripped away their fear, and eventually spread into the territory itself. Destroying it was required. The system did not describe what happened if I ignored it. Considering the black-veined creatures east of Haven, I did not need the details illustrated. The crystal became my territory heart. Through it, I could claim land, place buildings, monitor population, and upgrade Haven. Territory limits no longer existed. If I could defend a place, I could own it. That sounded limitless until I read the cost of a stone wall and remembered I currently owned 3 huts and half a ditch. A leaderboard opened next. Haven sat at rank 41. The first place territory belonged to someone named Ryan. He already had more buildings and nearly twice my population. For several seconds, I took that personally. Then I read the scoring rules. Buildings, population, territory level, combat quality barely mattered. My wounded pride recovered immediately. The leaderboard was measuring real estate, not who had the best skeleton. Global chat discovered the rankings at the same time. Half the conversation became accusations of cheating. The other half became regret from people who had named their territories things like Dragon Daddy Kingdom during the first hour. I closed the panel before the shame became contagious. Our first construction needed to solve an actual problem. Wood, stone, food, soul dust, spare equipment, and bear meat were stacked wherever space existed. I selected a warehouse, assigned the militia to gather materials, and watched a pale outline appear near the huts. Construction time, 2 hours. Chess. The system could evolve a man in seconds, but required 2 hours to build 4 walls and a roof. Even magic had contractors. Zuko formed a patrol with Craig and Haru. Daniel stayed behind to organize the skeleton workers, which mostly meant pointing them at trees and moving anything that wandered in the wrong direction. Haru was improving. He now faced the correct direction without physical assistance, and could perform a basic chop after Daniel demonstrated it enough times. His thoughts were still slow, but Daniel treated every small success as if Haru had discovered a new school of swordsmanship. Before Zuko left, I gave him one rule. If the east gets worse, come back. The goal is to clear safe ground, not prove you can kill everything living in the forest. He understood. He started to turn, then paused. And if the enemy follows? I looked toward the unfinished Arrow Tower site. Bring it here. We can learn what the ditch does. Zuko smiled. My caution was beginning to influence him, though perhaps not in the way nature intended. The patrol disappeared between the trees. Kill notices began arriving less than 10 minutes later. Jackal, wolf, spined boar. The notifications showed no details, but the steady rhythm told me Zuko had found work. At home, I built the Arrow Tower the moment the protection restriction lifted. Stone folded upward behind the eastern ditch, forming a narrow platform with a mechanical bow mounted at the top. It could identify hostile targets within range and fire automatically. The first test arrow buried itself almost completely through a thick log. I was delighted until I found the ammunition counter. 48 arrows, no known recipe. The tower was not a permanent defense. It was an emergency fund that shot people. I disabled automatic fire and assigned a militia unit to watch the east. If something dangerous came, he could pull a lever. One-step instructions remained his specialty. The warehouse finished soon after. Its interior was larger than its exterior, and anything stored inside shrank into a labeled space without losing weight or quality. I spent several minutes putting a log in, taking it out and putting it back again. Daniel watched from the doorway. "This is research," I told him. His jaw moved once. I had no idea whether he believed me. Zuko returned near midday covered in dark blood. Craig carried a sack of soul dust. Haru dragged the hindquarters of a wolf with great personal pride. No one was seriously injured. Zuko had used Craig as bait for a group of spined boars, hidden Daniel's students behind trees, and collapsed the attack from both sides. Craig described the plan with more excitement than concern, which meant either he trusted Zuko completely or evolution had not improved his sense of self-preservation enough. Their loot included 3 recruitment orbs and 2 resource pouches. The pouches produced iron ore, a clear crystal, dried meat, and a short sword. I claimed the sword. It was not because I expected to fight. It was because holding one made hiding behind my troops look more deliberate. The altar produced another militia, another skeleton, and something small enough to sit in my hand. She had green hair, transparent wings, and a dress made from layered leaves. The panel called her a fairy. She flew once around the altar, saw Daniel, and hid behind my neck. Daniel leaned to one side. The fairy moved to the other. He switched again. She squeaked and buried herself in my hair. "Daniel, give her space." He retreated 2 steps, visibly disappointed. The new species granted 1 fairy evolution point. I used it, and the fairy grew from thumb-sized to roughly the length of my hand. Her wings brightened. Awareness entered her eyes, followed immediately by suspicion when she saw Daniel was still nearby. Her skill was pollen. It could stimulate plant growth and cause mild drowsiness in living creatures. She tried it on me. Golden dust covered my face. I sneezed twice and felt like taking a short nap. The fairy's shoulders sagged. "No, that's useful," I said. "I was already tired. You made the decision easier." She stared at me, unconvinced. I carried her to the western fruit grove. The moment she saw the blue fruit trees, her entire body lifted with excitement. She flew from branch to branch, touching leaves and humming in a language made mostly of bells. "Nami," I said when she returned, "you're in charge of this place." Nami pointed at herself, then at the grove. "Plants. Food. No fighting unless there is absolutely no alternative." She saluted with both hands. That was how Haven gained its first agricultural manager before it had agriculture. On the walk back, 3 kill notices appeared at once. Goblin eliminated.ecs. Goblin eliminated.ecs. Goblin eliminated. Zuko stopped smiling. The goblins had come from the west, and they had been moving toward Haven. Our first group had not been lost travelers. Somewhere beyond the fruit grove, something was looking for them. I did not charge west looking for the goblin camp. That sentence should explain why I remained alive longer than many people expected. The east still contained corrupted monsters. The west now contained organized enemies. Until I knew which threat would arrive first, I wanted a safe circle around Haven, more evolved troops, and enough dust to heal anyone who got hurt earning it. Zuko took Craig, Haru, and 2 skeleton warriors east. Daniel stayed with the workers because 1 skilled skeleton could gather more wood than the entire militia line combined. Nami was supposed to scout above the patrol. I remembered that part 10 minutes after they left. Nami sat on a fruit basket beside me, eating with both hands. We looked at each other. "They'll be fine," she nodded, mostly because her mouth was full. The patrol was fine, the wolves were not. Zuko's team cleared an entire den and found a wooden chest in the center. That should have been good news. Instead, Zuko returned early, covered in blood and deeply offended by furniture. The chest could not be lifted. It had no visible lock. His spear could not scratch it. Haru had struck it until his sword bent slightly, which Zuko regarded as a personal failure of command. I heard treasure chest and stopped caring about his wounded pride. Daniel gathered a carrying team. Nami rode on my shoulder. We followed Zuko through the cleared eastern woods to a pile of dead wolves and 1 perfectly clean chest. "You stabbed it?" I asked. Zuko pointed at a tiny mark on the lid. Repeatedly, I touched the wood. Lord locked reward cache. Open? The chest had not hated everyone. It had simply been waiting for management. When I accepted, it dissolved into light and left 4 rewards, 2 skeleton recruitment orbs, a bathhouse blueprint, a 1-use magic shield scroll, and a sealed strip of black metal engraved with a symbol I did not recognize. The metal strip carried no description. The system only called it a fragment. I stored it because mysterious objects had a habit of becoming important immediately after being thrown away. The shield scroll could protect me from attacks below a certain threshold for 30 seconds. It worked only on the Lord. My first reaction was disappointment that I could not use it on Zuko. My second was recognition that I was the least durable person in every formation, and perhaps the system had a point. A howl rolled through the trees before we could leave. 10 wolves emerged around the den, led by a gray alpha with one torn ear. Nami squealed and disappeared beneath the back of my collar. The alpha charged Zuko. He waited until the last moment, swept his spear beneath its chest, and triggered his launch skill. The wolf rose into the air with an expression of profound surprise. Zuko stepped forward and impaled it before gravity had time to correct the mistake. The pack lost its courage with its leader. Daniel's cleaver crushed one wolf against a tree. Craig held two, at spear distance, while Haru protected his side. The militia stayed in a tight pair, following the simple command to stab anything that crossed a marked line. Nami peeked from my collar just as Daniel split a wolf's skull. Blood struck his face and ran through his jaw. She vanished again so fast she pulled my hair. The battle ended with no real injuries. That should have felt reassuring. Instead, it showed how completely our strongest units now outclassed the creatures that had terrified me on the first day. Power was useful. Power was also how people began making stupid decisions. I reminded myself of that while collecting the loot. Back at Haven, the 2 skeleton orbs produced new workers. Another random orb gave me a militia unit. The population was growing quickly enough that the huts had become crowded. But skeletons did not complain about standing outside, and the humans were too simple to organize a housing protest. I built the bathhouse beside the river path. Warm water filled a stone pool automatically. The building even cleaned itself. For a glorious 10 seconds, I believed I had solved Haven's water problem forever. Then I carried a bucket through the door. The water vanished. I tried a cup, same result. I filled a cooking pot, covered it, and backed through the doorway as if the building might be fooled by confidence. The pot became empty. Nami sat on the roof, watching every attempt. When I finally accepted defeat, she made a tiny motion that looked suspiciously like applause. "The water is bound to the building," I told her. I was testing the rule. She nodded with exaggerated seriousness. I was being mocked by a fairy. At least the humans could bathe. The skeletons joined them for reasons nobody could explain. Daniel sat chest-deep in the water with his sword resting beside the pool, while Haru scrubbed one arm bone so aggressively it came loose. Daniel helped attach it again. For one evening, Haven felt less like a survival camp and more like a very strange village. The feeling lasted until Zuko placed the black metal fragment beside the unreadable marks we had found near the northern cave. The symbols matched. Not perfectly, but enough to be deliberate. The chest, the cave, and whatever had lived north of us were connected. Before I could investigate, the western lookout arrived with a simpler problem. He had seen 15 goblins moving through the trees. They were armed, organized, and heading straight for Haven. The goblin war party never reached Haven. Zuko led us west before sunrise, taking every evolved unit and leaving the militia under the arrow tower. Daniel commanded the skeleton side. Craig stayed near me, which he accepted without complaint, even though both of us knew he was there because I needed a wall that could speak. We found the goblins in a narrow stretch between 2 rocky ridges, 15 total. Most carried clubs and spears, but 2 wore baskets of stones on their backs, and the largest had iron plates tied across his chest. They were looking toward Haven and arguing about which path to take. Zuko studied the ground. Daniel can circle behind them. Daniel tapped his cleaver twice against his shield. "Craig?" Zuko asked. Craig examined the slope. "We show ourselves there." They turn. Daniel closes. When Craig first arrived, he had needed help remembering his own name. Now he was contributing to an ambush. Evolution did not simply improve bodies, it accelerated people. I approved the plan and moved to the safest part of it. Craig and Zuko stepped onto the ridge. The goblin leader shouted and sent half his group uphill. Daniel's skeletons rose from the brush behind the remaining half. The battle ended before the rock throwers understood they had been surrounded. Daniel's heavy chop broke the leader's armor. Zuko launched one goblin into another, and used the fall to pin both. Craig took a stone against his shoulder, stayed upright, and skewered the thrower while it reached for a second shot. The last goblin tried to escape west. We let it run. Then we followed. It led us past 2 patrol routes, and directly to a stone structure shaped like a balance scale. 6 goblins guarded it. They were relaxed enough that 2 were asleep. Daniel's squad handled them without waking the second sleeper until the first had already disappeared into loot. The structure identified itself when I touched it. Train scale. Convert recruitment orbs into basic orbs of an unlocked species. Value depends on quality. At first, the exchange looked terrible. A 2-star random orb became 3 1-star species orbs. A 3-star orb became 6. Quality was being traded for quantity. For any normal lord, that was a painful compromise. For me, quality came from evolution points. Quantity created evolution points. I placed the goblin leader's 2-star orb on one side of the scale and selected skeletons. 3 basic skeleton orbs appeared on the other plate. Daniel leaned over them, blue fire brightening inside his chest. "Yes," I said. "More of you." His jaw rattled so loudly that Zuko turned to look. The exchange scale did not give me an army. It gave me the machine that would make one. Every unwanted orb could become more units. More units meant more points every 2 hours. Weak recruits were no longer disappointing. They were future upgrades that happened to carry axes. I may have laughed. Zuko politely pretended not to hear. We continued west, following the goblin patrol signs. The forest became strangely empty. No jackals. No wolves. Even birds avoided the area. That meant the goblins had either hunted everything or frightened it away. Nami hid inside a fold of my cloak. I had brought her because a flying scout could see over walls. After the Alpha Wolf incident, she had agreed only when I promised she would remain far above anything with teeth. The goblin camp appeared beyond a low hill. It was not a nest. It was a fortified settlement with a timber fence, watch platforms, and several huts. Dozens of goblins moved inside. Warriors trained near the gate. Rock throwers sorted stones. Red light flickered from the largest hut. Zuko and I watched from behind fallen logs. How many? I whispered. Too many to count from here. There was one person small enough to get closer. Nami understood what I wanted before I asked. She also hated it. Her hands tightened in my cloak. You don't have to enter the camp, I said. Circle once. Stay high. If anything looks at you, come back. She looked at Zuko. He held out his palm. I will watch. Nami could not understand his words yet, but she understood the tone. After several seconds, she climbed onto his hand and took off. She returned shaking, but she returned. Her gestures made no sense to me. Zuko followed them with surprising concentration. 40, he said. Maybe more. 2 strong warriors. 4 stone throwers. 1 red goblin near the large hut. Nami pointed at him excitedly. You understand her? Some of it? Zuko looked as surprised as I was. She thinks in pictures. Nami hugged one of his fingers. That settled the question of whether evolved units could form relationships without my involvement. 40 goblins against fewer than a dozen useful fighters was not a battle. It was an obituary with planning notes. We withdrew to the exchange scale and used the next several hours to recruit, gather points, and evolve Craig and Daniel. Craig reached elite quality but remained quieter and slower than Zuko. Daniel's armor thickened, a proper shield formed on his left arm, and he gained a spinning sweep that could strike every enemy around him. He tested it on 6 training stakes. All 6 became firewood. Our plan was simple. Nami would lure a small group from the camp. Daniel would ambush them. We would repeat until the numbers became manageable. The first pull brought 4 goblins. Daniel removed 2 heads in his opening swing. Zuko and Craig finished the rest. The second brought 6. Same result. The third brought a warrior and 2 rock throwers. Harder but controlled. The fourth brought fire. A ball of red light tore through the air beside Nami. She dropped so sharply that one wing clipped a branch. A red-skinned goblin stepped onto the watch platform with a crooked staff. It fired again while shouting to the entire camp. Every gate opened. Nami flew toward us with more than 20 goblins behind her. The plan was over. Retreat remained possible. We could abandon Nami, draw the goblins away from Haven, and survive. The thought formed cleanly in my mind. Then Nami screamed as a stone passed close enough to spin her through the air. Barge. Zuko moved first. Daniel held the goblin line like a thrown gate, shield forward, skeletons behind him. Craig took the right side and drove for the rock throwers. The red goblin launched a fireball at Daniel. His shield caught it and threw him backward in a trail of smoke. Zuko tried to break through, but 3 warriors locked spears around their leader. He called for Daniel to draw their attacks. Daniel rose with half his armor blackened and charged again. Fire and stones converged on him. He blocked one, endured another, and kept moving. The opening lasted less than a second. Zuko used it. He ran up a fallen shield, launched himself over the spear line, and hurled his weapon. Pale force wrapped the spear from point to grip. It crossed the camp like a bolt of light and drove through the red goblin's chest. The fire vanished. So did the goblin's courage. Craig reached the throwers. Daniel's sweep broke the center. Haru protected another skeleton after a rock shattered its knee, standing over it until help arrived. I caught Nami against my chest and moved behind the nearest tree. Her wing was bent, but not broken. She clung to my shirt while the battle ended beyond us. When silence returned, Zuko recovered his spear from the dead leader. Daniel checked the fallen skeleton before checking his own scorched armor. Craig sat against the fence with blood running from his shoulder and insisted the wound was shallow. Nobody had died. The system rewarded the victory with enough soul dust to fill a storage chest, multiple orbs, resource pouches, a farmland blueprint, and a sanitation house blueprint. But the most important discovery waited inside the camp. Behind the largest hut stood a shattered stone altar. It was identical to mine. The broken symbol on its base matched the black metal fragment from the chest. This camp had not always belonged to goblins. It had belonged to another lord. The broken altar changed the camp. One moment, it was a collection of dirty huts we had earned the right to loot. The next, every stain and splinter became evidence. Someone had once stood where I was standing. They had received troops, named a territory, and watched a protection timer fall. The goblins had not built over an empty patch of forest. They had taken a home. I placed my hand on the altar. Nothing answered. The core had been cracked into 3 pieces, and the system treated it as dead stone. Near the base, we found more strips of black metal marked with the same symbol as the fragment from the Lord-locked chest. Zuko arranged them on the ground. The pieces almost formed a circle. A crest? Craig guessed. Or a warning, I said. Daniel touched one fragment. The blue flame in his chest dimmed for a second, and he pulled his hand away. You felt something? He tapped his ribs, then pointed north. The same direction as the cave. We searched every hut. Most contained exactly what one would expect from goblins, moldy bedding, broken tools, bones I chose not to identify, and a smell that made the bathhouse feel like humanity's greatest achievement. The largest hut was different. Someone had built a storage compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside we found a bundle of pale seeds, 23 white fruits marked with blue lines, and a sheet of thin material covered in writing. The system identified the fruit as daybread. One piece could feed a human for an entire day. The seeds matured in 2 weeks on ordinary soil and faster on system farmland. I looked at the farmland blueprint in my inventory. For once, 2 rewards had arrived in the correct order. The written sheet refused identification. Zuko recognized repeating shapes, but could not read them. One symbol matched the metal crest. Another looked like 3 lines descending into a circle. I stored everything. The camp also gave us 2 names. Not people. Graves. Behind the shattered altar, beneath a fallen fence, we found 2 flat stones carved with simple marks. Each had a human-sized patch of disturbed earth beneath it. Whatever language the old lord had used, somebody had cared enough to bury 2 of their units. Daniel stood before the stones longer than anyone else. Haru joined him. The smaller skeleton did not understand the writing, but he copied Daniel's stillness. That was the first time the idea of losing one of them stopped being abstract. We returned to Haven before dark. I converted most of the goblin orbs at the exchange scale, keeping only 1 uncommon orb for emergencies. The rest became skeleton, militia, and fairy orbs. The altar filled the clearing with new bodies. The militia lined up. The skeletons waited in loose groups around Daniel. 3 tiny fairies appeared together, and Nami nearly flew into the altar from excitement. She rushed from one to another, speaking so quickly that even Zuko could not follow the images behind her gestures. The new fairies stared blankly until I evolved them. Awareness arrived in stages. One became talkative. One became shy. The third immediately flew toward the fruit basket and had to be intercepted. I did not name all of them. I had learned an important lesson about leadership. If I personally named every member of a growing army, I would eventually spend entire days inventing introductions. Nami became the fairy leader by unanimous agreement, meaning she pointed at the grove and the others followed. The sanitation house was less inspiring but more urgently needed. It built beside the bathhouse with private stalls, running water, and rough paper that felt luxurious compared with the alternatives nobody discussed. I admired it longer than a lord should admire a toilet. Then we built farmland around the daybread seeds. System fields did not simply create food, they gave temporary knowledge to assigned workers. The moment 3 militia stepped onto the soil, their blank expressions focused. They dug even rows, measured spacing, and planted the seeds with the confidence of experienced farmers. The same men could not remember guard the altar and return, but placed them on enchanted dirt and they understood crop rotation. I stopped asking the system to be philosophically consistent. Nami and her fairies released pollen over the first row. The soil warmed. Tiny shoots emerged several days ahead of schedule, then stopped when the fairies exhausted themselves. Nami dropped onto my shoulder, breathing hard. Good work, I said. Do not pass out into the field. Someone might plant you. She pinched my ear. Daniel brought Haru to me after sunset. A rock from the goblin battle had cracked Haru's shoulder joint. He could still move, but the fracture widened each time he lifted his sword. Daniel pointed to the injury, then to my evolution panel. He remembered my claim that evolution could repair units. I had made the promise without proof. Haru needed 6 undead points to reach elite quality. His current damage lowered the cost slightly, as if the system counted repair work as part of the transformation. I spent the points. Light enclosed him. The fractured shoulder sealed first. His frame thickened. Matching armor formed across his ribs, and a new shield locked around his left forearm. When the glow vanished, Haru rotated the repaired joint, then lifted his sword with no pain or weakness. He had also gained the skills he had been missing. Daniel grabbed both of Haru's shoulders and shook him so hard his armor rattled. Haru responded by clicking his jaw in the exact rhythm Daniel used when laughing. Evolution was more than quality. It was a reset body, equipment, skills, and mind, brought closer to what the unit could become. That made my power much more valuable. It also meant Daniel had been right to trust me. I felt the weight of that more than the new army outside. By the 4th morning, my human and undead point pools had grown enough for the upgrades I had been delaying. Zuko went first. His chain armor became layered silver plate. His spear changed into a long halberd with a narrow axe blade behind the point. The weapon bothered him for approximately 3 seconds before he tested its balance and discovered what it could do. One swing produced a blade of compressed air that cut through 2 training logs. Daniel evolved beside him. Bone-colored armor covered his frame, A heavy shield formed on his arm, and his cleaver gained a dark edge. His first ranged/carved a crescent through a boulder and buried itself in the hill behind it. They looked at each other. Then both began analyzing what they had done wrong. The airblade was too slow. The dark slash wasted energy. Their stance could improve. Their recovery left openings. I stood between two units who had learned ranged attacks in less than a minute and listened to them complain about performance. "You are allowed to be impressed with yourselves," I said. Zuko lowered the halberd. "After we make it reliable." Daniel nodded. They were impossible. They were also the reason I finally believed we could enter the corrupted East and return. The Eastern Forest announced the corruption before we saw it. Birdsong disappeared first, then insects. The leaves became brittle enough to crumble between my fingers, and black stains spread through the grass in branching lines. Zuko led 20 evolved troops in a wide formation. Daniel commanded the skeleton side. Craig held the human right. Haru stayed near Daniel, no longer a confused recruit but a capable elite with enough awareness to anticipate orders. I traveled in the center beside two shield-bearing skeletons. Some people might call that cowardice. Those people could stand in front. The first corrupted pack consisted of wolves. They attacked in silence, eyes clouded red, bodies thin from ignoring every instinct except aggression. Zuko stopped the line instead of meeting the charge. Spears lowered together. Wolves struck the formation and died on steel. Daniel's skeletons moved around the pinned bodies and finished anything still fighting. It was clean, disciplined, and almost easy. The second wave included black jackals that circled through the brush. Craig noticed the movement and rotated his side before they could flank us. Haru blocked one leap with his shield and cut the jackal down while it was still in the air. My units were solving problems faster than I could issue commands. That was the good news. The bad news came in the shape of a hyena standing on two legs. It was nearly twice my height, wrapped in patchy fur, with arms long enough to drag across the ground. The system labeled it a corrupted brute, 3-star quality. No skill list. No fear. Zuko's airblade opened its chest. The brute looked down at the wound, then kept running. Daniel met it with his shield. The impact drove his feet through the dead soil. Craig and two spearmen stabbed from the sides. The brute grabbed one shaft and pulled a soldier off balance. Haru cut its wrist. Zuko launched the creature upward, stepped beneath it, and drove the halberd through its throat when it came down. It died only after the spinal cord separated. No self-preservation. No response to pain. No retreat. Every corrupted monster behaved as if the root's only command was forward. We advanced for another hour. The monsters became stronger and more numerous while their rewards became worse. A 3-star brute dropped less soul dust than the goblin firecaster. The corruption consumed even the value of what it created. Our formation began to slow. Craig took a claw across his thigh, protecting a militia pair. One skeleton lost 2 fingers. Another had a wolf hanging from its shield, while a second attacked its back. Zuko and Daniel could still win every fight, but they could not be everywhere. Then the trees ahead moved. Not in the wind. Something large passed between them, knocking dead trunks aside. More red eyes appeared behind it than I could count. Zuko looked at me. He wanted to see what was coming. So did I. Curiosity was not worth a funeral. "We have enough information. Take the wounded. Fall back in formation." Nobody argued. The retreat tested us more than the advance. Corrupted creatures followed without tiring. Daniel's group alternated rearguard positions, while Zuko cut airblades through anything that clustered. Craig refused to be carried until his injured leg failed beneath him. I assigned 2 militia to support him and ignored his embarrassment. We crossed into healthy forest near midday. The pursuing monsters stopped at the boundary. They did not lose interest. They simply paced behind the last blackened trees, staring. The corruption route had a territory too. Back at Haven, I spent soul dust on Craig's wound and the damaged skeletons. Healing worked, but slowly. Evolution could repair them completely, yet using points on injuries meant delaying other upgrades. Another choice. Another bottleneck. Craig watched me calculate the cost. "Use it on the others," he said. "I can walk tomorrow. You could not walk 10 minutes ago. Tomorrow is different." Zuko crouched beside him. "And if we need you tonight?" Craig had no answer. I spent the points. His armor renewed, the torn muscle closed, and his quality rose. The transformation did not make him Zuko. He was still quieter, slower to improvise, and more comfortable following a plan than creating one. But he understood his role, and he had chosen other soldiers before himself. That mattered more to me than equal stats. I checked the global chat for one purpose: comparison. Other lords had found their corruption zones. One faced flying creatures that stayed beyond spear range. Another had monsters tunneling beneath defenses. Some had not located their route at all. Several top-ranked lords admitted retreating after meeting 2-star packs. Our zone was close and brutal, but at least our enemies approached from the ground. I posted nothing. The last thing I needed was the entire trial, learning that Haven could manufacture elite troops from basic orbs. The failed push had given us dust and orbs, even at reduced rates. I turned most of the orbs into skeletons at the exchange scale. By evening, Haven's population passed 60. The point cycle accelerated again. Daniel divided his new soldiers into teams and discovered command was harder than combat. Half his skeletons understood gestures, the rest copied whichever unit stood closest, including Haru, who accidentally led an entire line into the bathhouse while trying to retrieve his shield. Zuko helped Daniel create simple signals. 1 strike on the shield meant stop, 2 meant advance, a raised sword meant spread. Haru demonstrated each command until even the slowest skeleton responded. Watching them turn confusion into structure gave me the answer to our next problem. We did not need to overpower the corruption yet. We needed to search around it. The northern cave, the broken crest, and the old goblin camp all pointed toward intelligent activity near the corrupted border. If another lord had left information behind, it might tell us what guarded the route. At dawn, we would go north with enough troops to make the forest regret noticing us. Haven rose to 7th place on the 5th morning. The leaderboard reacted as if I had committed a crime. Chat filled with questions about hidden buildings, population exploits, and whether rank manipulation was possible. Ryan, still near the top, dismissed the change as temporary. Several people began arguing on my behalf even though I had never spoken to any of them. I closed the panel. Rank was useful as a measure of growth. Attention was not. Before leaving, I evolved Nami again. The small bud on her head opened into a yellow flower, and her leaf dress gained pale green patterns. Her new ability summoned thin vines from living soil. Against a training skeleton, the vines wrapped both legs and held for several seconds before snapping. Nami landed in front of me with both hands on her hips. Very dangerous, I assured her. She pointed at the broken vines. Dangerous for several seconds. Her glare intensified. Zuko translated the emotional content without being asked. She says you should stand in the vines next time. Tell her leadership cannot risk unnecessary injury. Nami understood that excuse without translation and flew away. We marched north with almost every elite unit. The cave remained dark and quiet, but a tree nearby carried a carved version of the broken crest. Fresh cuts marked the bark. Someone had been there recently. I divided the army into search groups of 10. Zuko coordinated the humans. Daniel used shield signals to control the skeletons. Each group stayed close enough to hear a horn if trouble appeared. For 2 hours, we found nothing. No camp, no tracks, no second carving. The intelligent creatures Zuko had sensed could have been one traveler, a hidden group, or a very artistic monster with no interest in introductions. The search was becoming a walk with weapons. I changed the plan. The crest appeared near the cave. The fragments appeared at a destroyed territory. The corruption sat east of both. Instead of searching healthy forest, we followed the northern edge of the dead land. The army's size made the corrupted packs manageable. Wolves and jackals charged our lines and disappeared beneath coordinated spears. Daniel's skeletons handled clustered enemies. Zuko's humans broke larger targets. The rotation kept either side from exhausting its energy. Then, Zuko saw stone through the trees. At first, I saw only gray shapes. As we moved closer, broken walls emerged beneath dead vines. Houses, a gate. An entire village swallowed by the corrupted border. Dozens of monsters wandered inside without attacking one another. Wolves slept beside jackals. Hyena brutes stood at intersections like guards. Whatever the route did, it had connected creatures that should have been competing. Zuko and Daniel scouted ahead alone. They returned with a count close to our own numbers, 4 brutes and 1 much larger hyena carrying a spiked club. Near the village center sat an iron chest. The intelligent inhabitants were gone. We could retreat, keep searching elsewhere, and risk nothing. Then Zuko mentioned the chest. I remembered what the wooden one had given us. Greed is dangerous. Greed with supporting evidence calls itself strategy. We built the plan around the largest brute. Zuko would isolate it. Daniel would clear one of the lesser brutes and reinforce him. Craig and Haru took the other 2. Spear lines would receive the wolves. Skeleton pairs would stop anything that broke through. I kept 6 shields around myself and stood behind a collapsed wall. The army advanced. Every monster in the village turned at once. The first charge hit our braced line and folded around it. Spears entered mouths, throats, and chests. Skeleton swords rose and fell behind the points. Zuko's commands carried over the noise, moving reserves before gaps fully opened. The giant hyena broke through a wall instead of using the street. Its panel appeared when it came close enough. Corrupted Hyena Chief, Tier 2, 3 stars. I had never seen Tier 2 before. Zuko had already engaged it. He sent an air blade toward its head. The chief answered with a red claw of energy. The attacks collided, and Zuko shattered into pale fragments. The red strike continued, carving a trench through the ground where he had stood. The gap between them was not small. Zuko drew it away from the formation, using broken walls as cover. The chief's spiked club smashed stone every time it missed. One impact grazed Zuko's armor and sent him rolling across the street. Daniel killed his assigned brute with a dark slash through the neck. He looked toward Zuko. Zuko raised one hand. Wait. Daniel obeyed long enough to help Craig finish the second brute. Haru locked his shield beneath the third creature's jaw while Craig drove a spear through its eye. Only then did Daniel charge the chief. His shield struck the hyena's side. Zuko attacked from the opposite angle. The chief blocked one and ignored the other, accepting a cut across its ribs to swing at Daniel's skull. Daniel ducked. The club removed the top of a stone post behind him. Together, they changed tactics. Daniel stopped trying to damage the chief and became its obstacle. He blocked, shoved, and forced it to turn. Zuko watched each movement until the pattern became predictable. The chief lifted its club for another red claw. Daniel slammed his shield into the elbow. The attack fired upward. Zuko hooked the halberd behind the creature's knee and launched it off balance. Before it hit the ground, Daniel's cleaver took the weapon arm. Zuko stepped through the falling blood and drove the spear point under its jaw. The blade emerged from the top of its skull. The chief stopped moving. Across the village, our formation was winning. Craig held the human flank with a line so disciplined that the corrupted wolves threw themselves against it until none remained. Haru led 4 skeletons through a narrow alley and trapped the final brute between shields. When the last monster fell, no one cheered. The village was too quiet for celebration. We had injuries, but no deaths. A spear shaft had broken. 2 skeletons needed arms reattached. 1 militia had a bite through the calf. Compared with the enemy force, the result felt impossible. I walked the ruined streets after healing the worst wounds. The houses were handmade, not system-built. Pickaxes lay beneath collapsed roofs. Iron ore filled broken carts. Someone had mined the northern cave and lived here before the corruption arrived. In the village center, the iron chest waited beside a stone, covered with the same crest. This time, the symbol was complete. 3 lines descended into a circle. Beneath it, someone had carved a second image, a root wrapped around an eye. I placed my hand on the chest. The lock opened. The iron chest paid for the battle in a way the wooden one never could. The first reward was a 3-star Falcon recruitment orb. The second was a pouch containing 12 crystals: fire, water, wind, earth, light, and dark, 2 of each. A bronze key claimed it could open any barrier below rare quality. A wooden staff held a red crystal large enough to warm the air around it. The final item was a blueprint. Practice Spotch. Prabor, C, Mark 1 unit. View through the marked unit's eyes within territory range. I read the description twice. Since arriving, every dangerous decision had required me to travel with the army because only I could read enemy panels. The observation stone would not copy that ability, but seeing danger before my units walked into it was still worth more than another tower. Zuko lifted the fire staff. The red crystal brightened, then went dark. Daniel tried next. Dark energy crawled over his fingers without entering the crystal. Different power, Zuko concluded. The system confirmed it. Their skills used internal battle energy. The staff required magic. I tried it anyway. Nothing happened. I was now the proud owner of an expensive stick nobody could use. The barrier key had no immediate purpose either. That made 2 rewards for future problems, and 1 blueprint for a current problem. The system was beginning to resemble a relative who bought gifts based on what I might become someday. We searched the village before leaving. The crest appeared on the mine carts, pickaxes, and several doorframes. The black metal fragments had once formed worker badges or access tokens. Beneath the largest house, Haru uncovered a sealed cellar. The bronze key opened it. Inside, the air remained dry despite the ruined roof above. Shelves held rusted tools, empty food jars, and 1 wall covered in charcoal marks. The marks counted days. 29 lines, then a gap, then 3 more. Someone had survived here after the village fell. At the bottom of the wall, a final drawing showed people entering a cave while a black root spread beneath the village. The northern mine had not only supplied the settlement, it had been a shelter. We were not equipped to explore it after a full battle, so I did something the version of me from 3 days earlier would have admired. I left. We carried the chest rewards, iron ore, intact tools, and every readable scrap back toward Haven. On the way, Zuko hunted an uncorrupted boar for dinner. The army had earned meat that did not contain black veins or an aggressive spiritual infection. At the exchange scale, I converted most of the village orbs into basic skeleton and militia orbs. Craig watched 6 weak orbs replace 1 rare one. That still feels wrong, he said. Today, yes. In 2 days, those 6 units will have generated enough points to improve themselves and everyone after them. I am not trading strength for weakness. I am buying time in bulk. Zuko nodded immediately. Craig needed a moment, then nodded too. Daniel simply collected the skeleton orbs and carried them home like treasure. The falcon came last. When the orb opened, a brown and gold bird appeared on the altar with wings broad enough to brush both sides. Her eyes were bright, her talons sharp, and her panel called her an elite scout falcon. I named her Pan. Pan looked at me, looked at the open sky, and launched herself upward without waiting for an order. Fleetly, she circled once and landed on the roof of my hut. Her intelligence was closer to an animal than Zuko or Daniel. Commands needed to be concrete: fly there, circle, return. Anything involving time, distance, or do not make me panic exceeded the current relationship. Nami returned from the fields while I was trying to coax Pan onto my arm. The fairy stopped in midair. Pan turned her head. Nami retreated behind Zuko. Pan spread 1 wing. Nami produced vines around the roof post. Nobody attacks anybody, I said. Neither of them listened because one did not understand language and the other had decided fear was a military problem. Zuko stepped between them. He lowered one hand for Nami and extended the other toward Pan. His voice stayed calm. Nami's vines loosened. Pan folded her wing. After several minutes, the fairy moved from behind his shoulder to inspect the bird's feathers. Pan tolerated the inspection until Nami pulled too hard, then snapped her beak. Nami flew backward, offended but unhurt. It was not friendship. It was a ceasefire with potential. The observation stone required rare crystals from the chest, several hundred soul dust, and most of our stored iron. I paid the cost before I could reconsider. A dark stone pillar rose beside the territory heart. Its smooth face reflected no light. When I marked Craig for the first test, a white symbol appeared on his forehead, and the pillar showed exactly what he saw, including me leaning much too close to the surface. I stepped back. Craig looked at the stone. The display showed itself showing him looking at it, creating an endless corridor of smaller Craigs. We both stopped the experiment. I moved the mark to Pan. The world changed. Through her eyes, Haven became a cluster of roofs, fields, towers, and moving dots. The fruit grove spread west like a blue stain. The northern river flashed between trees. East of us, the forest darkened into a dead wedge that stretched far beyond the distance we had walked. Pan banked sharply. My stomach tried to follow even though my body remained on the ground. Nami appeared in the view, flying beside her. The fairy kept a careful distance, then landed between Pan's shoulders. Pan dipped once, perhaps intending to throw her off. Nami flattened herself against the feathers and held on. The bird leveled out. Within minutes, the ceasefire became a flight lesson. I watched them circle the territory and felt something unfamiliar settle over me. Pride, probably, or the early symptoms of becoming the kind of person who called an armed settlement a family. Pan flew east. Healthy trees thinned beneath her. The black ground widened. Far ahead, monsters gathered in numbers large enough to move like a dark current through the forest. Then the image vanished. Pan had flown outside the observation stone's range. The pillar went black. I stood there with no way to call her back and no way to know what had seen her. The most useful scouting tool in Haven had just taught me its first limitation. Range mattered. So did giving a bird instructions more specific than, look east. Pan remained missing for 27 minutes. That was long enough for me to invent 6 different ways a falcon could die, and 3 ways Nami could make the situation worse by attempting a rescue. The observation stone flickered. Dead trees rushed beneath Pan's wings. Nami was still on her back, both hands buried in feathers, her flower bent flat by the wind. The view crossed into healthy forest. I ran outside before they landed. Pan touched down on the altar roof. Nami slid from her back, staggered through the air, then flew directly into my chest. That was not a short scouting flight. Nami pointed east with frantic gestures. Zuko came close enough to translate the picture she formed. Many monsters, he said. A circle around something underground. She saw red light between the roots. The corruption route. We finally knew its direction and approximate distance. We also knew the Guardian force matched or exceeded the army we had fought in the ruined village. Going immediately would have been possible. Winning would have been a different matter. I grounded Pan for the rest of the morning. Nami objected until I clarified that grounded meant local flights only, not imprisonment. 5 minutes later, she was sitting on Pan's back again while the bird walked around the field in visible humiliation. The village loot pushed Haven into a new phase. We had iron, tools, seeds, and enough orbs to cross 100 total units. The population threshold for Territory Level 2 sat within reach. Zuko and Daniel split the army into patrol and work teams. Routine kills became routine enough that I stopped dramatizing everyone. Wolves died. Dust accumulated. Orbs went through the exchange scale. Basic units arrived. Every 2-hour cycle moved faster than the one before. The loop was working. Its cost became visible in food. Skeletons consumed almost nothing, but almost was not zero. Their soul flames required small amounts of dust over time. Humans ate every day. The daybread crop was still growing. Without Nami's boosted fields and the fruit grove, our population strategy would have starved itself before the root had a chance. Nami's work mattered as much as Daniel's sword. I made that official. She became head of food production. The other fairies followed her across both fields, taking turns applying growth pollen so no single unit collapsed. Militia handled planting and water. Skeletons built fences and cleared new ground. Nami listened to my instructions, then pointed at Pan. Pan is not a farm worker. Nami pointed to the sky, the fields, and herself. Zuko translated. She wants Pan assigned to her group. Pan stood nearby, tearing strips from a piece of boar meat. As transportation, Nami nodded. Pan received a promotion without being consulted. By midday, the population count reached 103. I placed both hands on the territory heart and selected upgrade. The system responded with a quiet chime. Territory level increased. S. That was all. No beam of light. No shaking ground. No voice announcing my greatness to the sky. I had spent 6 days building an army for the magical equivalent of a receipt. The individual buildings were more generous. My hut upgraded for no material cost. Wood walls became fitted stone. The straw bed became an actual mattress. A kitchen appeared with a hearth and shelves. The roof no longer leaked, which alone justified every monster we had killed. The warehouse expanded. The bathhouse gained hot water. The sanitation house produced softer paper. The arrow tower's range increased, though its ammunition problem remained. Housing doubled. The farms accelerated. A rough timber palisade now enclosed the central buildings, with simple gates facing east and west. It would not stop a serious army, but Haven finally had an inside. Haven stopped looking temporary. For the first time, I could stand at the center and see a settlement rather than a camp waiting to fail. The territory heart unlocked new options: roads, workshops, larger fields, a second defense tower category for which I lacked a blueprint. The altar unlocked one option: Earth travel available. Syst. I forgot every other menu. The cost was 100 soul dust. Travel lasted up to 24 hours. System inventory could not cross. Units could not accompany a lord still in the trial. Earth. My apartment. Running water that did not charge dust. Food with seasoning. A mattress that had never contained straw. I should have felt desperate to return. Instead, my first thought was that I could not check Haven while I was gone. Zuko and Daniel found me standing before the altar. I explained the option and the time limit. Zuko accepted command immediately. Daniel looked at the altar, stepped onto it, and waited. Nothing happened. He looked at me. "Only lords," I said. Daniel stepped off with the posture of someone personally rejected by architecture. Before leaving, we prepared for the worst. Zuko controlled all patrols. Daniel commanded night defense. Craig managed the human teams if Zuko left the territory. Haru stayed with Daniel. Nami controlled food and Pan's flights. We loaded the arrow tower and placed reserve weapons at each side of Haven. I marked Zuko with the observation stone, then learned the view disappeared the moment I crossed worlds. Another limit. At the altar, I hesitated. 6 days earlier, Earth had been the only world I knew. Now leaving Haven felt like walking away from people who would keep moving after I disappeared. Zuko noticed. "We will be here when you return." Daniel struck his fist against his chest. Craig gave me a short nod. Nami sat on Pan's head and waved both arms. I paid the dust. Silver light swallowed the settlement. The last thing I saw was Daniel stepping onto the altar behind me for one more attempt. Then I landed on the floor of my apartment. The air conditioner was still broken. Some problems survived dimensional travel. My apartment looked exactly as I had left it. An empty glass sat beside the sink. Laundry remained in a chair. The digital clock blinked because the blackout had reset it. Dust covered the floor except for the spot where I appeared. 6 days had passed. No police tape. No messages under the door. No worried neighbor waiting in the hall. I checked my phone. No missed calls. It was comforting to know my disappearance had caused no problems. It was less comforting to realize that was because almost nobody had noticed. A silver mark glowed on the back of my hand. The system called it a temporary lord mark. My menus were locked. Evolution was gone. Inventory was gone. Even the sword I carried before traveling had remained in Haven. On Earth, I was ordinary again. I showered for far too long, changed into clean clothes, and ate the first thing I found in the kitchen. It tasted bland compared with what I imagined I remembered, so I ordered enough restaurant food for 3 people. While waiting, I searched the news. Hundreds of thousands of people had vanished from different countries on the same day. There should have been alerts, investigations, families demanding answers. There was nothing. I tried different dates, missing person reports, conspiracy pages, and local forums. No pattern. No public panic. A disappearance large enough to change society had produced less discussion than a celebrity haircut. Either the system hid it, or the world had learned to hide it for the system. I searched the words I knew instead. Lord Trial. Recruitment Orb. Territory Heart. Corruption Route. Most results were games and fiction. Buried beneath them was a plain forum with no description. Its background showed 4 silhouettes: a militia soldier, a skeleton, a goblin, and a slime. The registration page asked one question: what unlocks when population and construction satisfy the first territory threshold? I answered, level 2 and Earth travel. The forum opened. The first page changed everything. The current Lord Trial was not the first. New groups had been summoned every 6 months for years. The trial world was a protected pocket realm filled with system assistance, convenient loot, and temporary rules. Anyone who survived 30 days became a full lord and entered the real Lord realm. There, chests did not appear after convenient battles. Inventory weakened. Enemy panels disappeared. Territories could be attacked by intelligent kingdoms rather than goblin camps. The trial was not the game. It was the tutorial. I read faster. Posts explained quality tiers, levels, territory loss, unit awareness, resource dungeons, and Earth travel. Low-quality units followed commands without true understanding. Higher quality units developed language, initiative, memory, and finally full self-awareness. Zuko and Daniel were not anomalies caused only by affection or luck. Evolution had pushed them through mental thresholds. Most units reached only after rare breakthroughs. That explained why Zuko could translate Nami's thoughts. It explained Daniel's humor, fear for Haru, and refusal to leave graves without acknowledgement. It also meant the farther I evolved them, the less reasonable it would be to think of them as mine. They served me. They trusted me. Neither fact made them objects. The distinction sat uncomfortably in my mind. I found a thread about destroyed trial territories. The answer was short. If the altar broke during the trial, the Lord died. Sometimes the body vanished. Units either died, went feral, or remained near the ruins until monsters killed them. The Goblin Camp altar had not been abandoned. Someone had lost it. The writing from the ruined village might belong to their survivors. I photographed the black crest from memory as best I could and searched the forum. One old post used a similar mark. It belonged to a mining territory from the second summoning wave. The author mentioned evacuating workers into a sealed mine after corruption spread unexpectedly fast. There was no follow-up. The delivery arrived while I was reading. I opened the door to find a confused driver holding 4 bags of food. He looked at me, looked at the order, and asked whether I was having a party. Something like that. I ate alone at the kitchen table. Real rice, spiced meat, vegetables that had not been tested on Zuko first. I expected the meal to feel like returning to life. Instead, I kept thinking about whether Craig's leg had fully healed, and whether Nami would let Pan fly east again without supervision. The temporary mark showed 19 hours remaining. I returned to the forum. A private message waited. Stay where you are. A local representative is coming. Do not summon attention. Do not attempt to leave the region. No name. No explanation. I read it twice. Then someone knocked on my door. 3 slow taps. A pause. 3 more. I picked up the largest kitchen knife I owned. It felt embarrassingly small after 6 days around halberds and cleavers. The man outside knocked a 3rd time. 0, he called through the door. I know where you spent the last 6 days. The knife did not make me feel safer. It did make me feel less foolish when I opened the door 3 centimeters and looked through the gap. The man outside was in his 30s, wearing a gray jacket over a wrinkled shirt. He had the tired expression of someone sent to complete a task 5 minutes before the end of his shift. Behind him stood a woman in a pointed blue hat and full wizard robes. No costume fabric, no plastic staff. The blue crystal above her hand floated without support. The man noticed my knife. Reasonable, he said. Not useful, but reasonable. I'm Doran. He held up a business card. It contained a name, a number, and nothing else. You know where I was? Lord Trial Pocket Realm. 5th wave. Local return registered at 8:12 this morning. Your growth signal is loud enough that I got called before breakfast. That answer contained too many things I had not told anyone. I opened the door wider but kept the knife. Doran stepped inside. The wizard followed, though a neighbor passed in the hallway and did not look at her once. Not even a glance at the floating crystal. Concealment, Doran said when he saw my expression. People see what fits. A woman in a coat, a delivery worker, empty space. Depends how hard they look. He sat at my kitchen table and examined the remains of my meal. You ordered enough for a squad. I have been eating fruit and unseasoned bear. The wizard remained by the wall. I offered water. Doran accepted. She did not move. Unit? I asked. Mage. 4-star. Smarter than both of us, so try not to insult her because you think she's decoration. The wizard smiled slightly. I put down the knife. Doran reached for one of the unopened food containers, looked at me for permission, and started eating after I nodded. Whatever dramatic authority he represented, it did not cover breakfast. You found the public forum, he said. How do you know? Your screen is still on. I turned the laptop away. He grinned. Relax. The forum exists so fast returners can learn before we arrive. Earlier waves had nothing, no global chat, no public guides. Half of us spent our first Earth Day trying to prove we were not hallucinating. How many waves? You are 5. Every 6 months, the system picks another group. Nobody knows the final purpose or why the number grows. Governments noticed after the first wave because people vanished and returned with impossible abilities. The public didn't notice. The public notices individual missing people. They don't see the pattern. Systems blur records. Agencies bury the rest. Panic helps no one. That sounded less like reassurance and more like policy. Doran read the concern on my face. You are not under arrest. You did not break a law by being selected. I'm here to keep you from breaking several after you discover what a full lord can bring back. He pointed at the wizard. Full lords can manifest units on Earth for limited periods. Strong units can bend what normal people consider possible. Every wave produces a few new lords who return, decide they are chosen by destiny, and begin settling old arguments. We visit early so nobody mistakes a trial leaderboard for permission to become a criminal. I came home for food and clothes. That is why we're having a conversation instead of a demonstration. His tone remained casual, but the wizard's floating crystal brightened for 1 second. Message received. Doran asked about Haven. I did not explain evolution. I told him population, territory level, unit quality, and the distance to my corruption route. His expression changed when I mentioned more than 100 units before day 7. That is fast. The trial has been generous. The trial is never generous. It invests in entertaining outcomes. He asked what my highest unit quality was. Rare. The food stopped halfway to his mouth. 2 of them. Doran set down the container. You are either very lucky or lying badly. Can both be true? Usually. He called me a fast riser, not a chosen one. The term sounded less embarrassing, though it carried the same warning. Lords who gained strength quickly often confused early acceleration with permanent superiority. The real Lord realm corrected that belief. After the trial, territories appeared in wild regions near but not inside established human lands. Monster kingdoms, local powers, and other races controlled vast areas. System chests and resource pouches disappeared. Enemy panels became unreliable or vanished. A territory that grew quickly attracted predators capable of planning. Can a lord surrender? I asked. To another lord? Sometimes. To the things that usually destroy new territories, they do not accept paperwork. What happens if the territory falls? After the trial, the lord can survive. Take the units you can save and run. You lose the land, buildings, production, and most paths to growth, but you stay alive. During the trial, altar loss means death. The broken goblin camp altar returned to my mind. Somebody from the second wave had a mining territory near me. Doran's eyes narrowed. I described the Black Crest, ruined village, northern mine, and charcoal drawing of survivors entering the cave. He took my laptop, opened the forum, and searched through an archive available only to his account. A territory record appeared. Deep Well. Lord, status lost during trial. No public name. No unit list. Why? No cause. The system used to keep trial zones separate, Doran said. Later waves sometimes overlap old terrain. If Deep Well shelter survived, you may find records or units in that mine. Do not assume anything inside is friendly. I have a key that opens barriers. Of course you do. He rubbed his face. What? Fast risers always have the exact item needed for a future disaster. It is irritating to those of us who spend months solving doors with explosives. The wizard spoke for the first time. You used too much explosive. Doran looked at her. The door opened. The room did not remain. I liked her immediately. Doran changed the subject. Countries had formed Lord organizations after the second wave. Ours was simply called the Lord Alliance. It coordinated Earth secrecy, shared information, traded scarce resources, rescued territory survivors when possible, and organized defense in the Lord realm. Membership was normally offered after trial completion. Fast risers received the conversation early. You have 2 broad paths, Doran said. Partnered or independent. Partnered lords receive major support, experienced officers, supplies, and nearby territory placement when we can influence it. The alliance gains operational authority and a share of production. Independent, your land, your command, your mistakes. You get forum access, trade privileges, basic intelligence, and possible emergency help. In return, you follow regional defense calls and do not undermine other members. What does emergency help cost? Depends how much of an emergency you create. There it was. Even another world had debt. He did not pressure me to choose immediately. That made the choice easier. Zuko and Daniel trusted my decisions because Haven belonged to all of us, not because a distant office had assigned quotas. Giving another organization authority over them before I understood that organization felt wrong. Doran sighed through his nose. Every fast riser says independent. You sound disappointed. I'm partnered. I have a salary, an apartment, and people who send replacement walls when mine explode. I know exactly how much work freedom creates, and you still offer it. Because the Alliance needs people willing to expand without waiting for permission. We just prefer when those people survive. He checked the time. If you're serious, we can register you now. The office is 20 minutes away. I looked at the temporary mark. 14 hours remained. Haven was safe when I left. Safe had changed definitions several times this week. Let's go. The wizard lifted her staff. I braced for teleportation. Doran stood. Not here. Long-distance transport costs more energy than fuel. We are driving. The wizard smiled again. Apparently, magic had a budget too. The Lord Alliance occupied an ordinary office building between a dental clinic and an insurance company. If Doran had not walked through the front door, I would have assumed the address was wrong. Inside, the building expanded beyond what the exterior could hold. Hallways branched around rooms filled with maps, crystal screens, equipment cases, and people dressed in everything from business suits to partial armor. A horned creature carried boxes past a receptionist. Nobody outside reacted when the front doors opened. Same concealment? I asked. Stronger, Doran said. Normal visitors remember an appointment they forgot and leave. He led me upstairs while complaining that he had been 3 days from rotating back to the Lord Realm when my return signal appeared. Another staff member had apparently assigned him every unusual case in the region after a previous fast riser named Max destroyed an interview room. What did Max do? Demonstrated a skill after being asked not to. What skill? The room was on the 3rd floor. The wall landed in the parking garage. I decided not to ask further. Registration took place in a room with a printer, 2 chairs, and no ceremonial decorations. Doran produced a 1-page agreement titled Lord Alliance Independent Pact. I read every line. No hidden loyalty oath. No transfer of territory. No automatic military service. I agreed not to attack member territories without arbitration, reveal the alliance publicly, trade restricted Earth weapons into the Lord Realm, or ignore region-level emergency calls without cause. The alliance agreed to provide information access, identity protection, trade channels, and evacuation consideration. This looks too simple, I said. Earth contracts cannot control another dimension. Trust and consequences do most of the work. Partnered lords signed the thick version. He pointed to a binder on a shelf. It was wide enough to stop an arrow. What I signed. Doran added my temporary mark to the page. Silver light moved through the ink and disappeared. Welcome to the Alliance, he said. Pending survival. Warm welcome. We saved the banner for day 31. The private forum opened on my phone. Compared with the public pages, it was an entire library. Territory defense guides. Unit awareness research. Maps of established regions. Exchange rates. Reports on corrupted zones. Warnings about artifacts that appeared useful and were not. I searched evolution talents. Nothing matched mine. There were single-use evolution stones, inherited bloodlines, group-quality buffs, and rare buildings that improved one species over months. No recorded ability-generated points from every owned unit and upgraded species without materials. I closed the search before Doran saw what I was reading. My talent was not merely strong. It was undocumented. The less people knew until I understood its limits, the better. Doran gave me a tour while waiting for my forum permissions to finalize. One room monitored new return signals. Another held damaged artifacts. A training hall contained reinforced walls and several warning signs clearly written after Max's visit. Partnered lords worked in rotating teams. Because full lords could remain on Earth for about a month before forced return, the Alliance scheduled staff around those windows. When one group went back to defend territory, another returned to handle administration. Why are full lords forced back? I asked. Nobody knows. The mark tolerates Earth temporarily, then the connection pulls. If your territory was destroyed while you were away, you return to the ruins. That is why hiding here forever is not a strategy. Can units remain on Earth? Not indefinitely. Manifestation consumes the Lord's energy and the territory connection. Stronger units cost more. My mage could stay several hours without trouble, but I would feel it later. The wizard looked at him. You already feel it. I was trying to appear impressive. You appeared tired. Doran dismissed her with a gesture. Blue light folded around her, and she vanished. His shoulders dropped immediately. Much better. He handed me a list of trial priorities. Find and destroy the corruption route before day 16. Gather every chest and temporary resource possible. Build population without collapsing food supply. Develop self-aware officers. Do not spend rare items merely because the system called them rare. Why day 16? Doran led me back to a crystal terminal and opened a sealed thread. The Lord Tournament, Trial Day 6 once. Every active Lord who cleared a corruption route could enter. The tournament matched armies in simulated spaces where death and injury did not carry back to the trial. Rewards scaled by placement. First place received a hero recruitment orb. Heroes were not normal units. They possessed identities, talents, and growth paths before recruitment. Some had existed in the Lord realm long before being bound to a Lord. Others were created by trials. A single hero could become the center of an army. Do veterans compete? I asked. Only your wave. That does not mean easy. Every country has fast risers. Some talents are ridiculous. More ridiculous than evolution? The thought stayed inside my head. Out loud, I asked how rankings worked. Unknown until it starts. Past tournaments changed format. Duels, objectives, survival rounds, territory defense. The system dislikes predictability. The hero orb gave me a new roadmap. Clear the route. Enter the tournament. Win. Confidence rose first. Then I remembered the monster army Pan had seen. One goal at a time. Doran offered basic supplies, but trial restrictions prevented physical items from crossing unless worn directly or system-bound. Alliance resources could not reach Haven until I became a full Lord. Information was the only immediate benefit. It was enough. Before leaving, I showed him a sketch of the complete crest and the route wrap die. He searched private records and found a note from Deepwell's final day. Evacuation seal moved to lower mine. Surface lost. Route Guardian changed after consuming territory core. The note ended there. Your route may have absorbed what remained of the old territory, Doran said. That could explain the overlap in the Guardian force. Could survivors still be in the mine? After years in trial time? Unlikely. Units can survive longer than people, especially underground. Whether they are still themselves is another question. The cave mystery remained open, but the route had become more urgent. If its Guardian had consumed an old territory heart, waiting might make it stronger. The mark on my hand showed 10 hours. Doran drove me home. At my building, the wizard reappeared long enough to teleport me from the car to my apartment door. The trip lasted less than a blink. I arrived sitting on the floor. Doran's message appeared seconds later. Sorry about the landing. Long range is expensive. I replied that I had experienced worse public transportation. The rest of my Earth visit became preparation. I read Alliance guides until my eyes hurt. I learned that levels improved raw power, while quality affected intelligence, growth speed, skill access, and talent potential. I learned rare quality fairies remained physically weak, but could transform agriculture if organized in groups. I learned Falcon Scouts often formed bonds with smaller flying units. Nami and Pan had discovered accepted strategy by arguing on a roof. I also learned clothes crossed worlds if worn, even when layered. That led to a shopping trip where I purchased durable shirts, socks, boots, and several sets of plain clothing. I wore as much as I could without appearing to be smuggling myself. At the apartment, I looked like a person dressed for 4 climates simultaneously. I ate one last proper meal, slept on a real mattress for 3 hours, and woke before the mark forced me back. Earth was comfortable. Haven was waiting. I touched the silver mark. The apartment folded into light. I reappeared on the altar beneath a clear morning sky. Zuko stood in front of me with a written report. Daniel stood beside him holding a cracked shield. Nami and Pan were nowhere in sight. What happened? I asked. Zuko looked at the layers of clothing covering me, decided the question could wait, and handed me the report. We were attacked from the east. I removed 5 layers of clothing while Zuko delivered the report through the bedroom door. The attack came 6 hours after I left. 40 corrupted creatures crossed the healthy forest boundary together, more organized than any wandering pack. They approached the arrow tower from outside its range, split into 3 groups, and tried to pull defenders away from Haven. That behavior was new. Zuko refused the bait. He pulled every worker inside the inner ditch, stationed Craig at the western gap, and kept the skeletons hidden behind the huts. Daniel controlled the east with Haru and the shield line. When the creatures entered tower range, Zuko fired only 6 arrows. The first killed a brute. The next 5 broke the front rush. Daniel charged after the formation collapsed, and Craig closed the western side when the flankers revealed themselves. No units died. Daniel's shield cracked, stopping an energy claw. 3 militia were injured. 1 skeleton lost a leg and spent the rest of the battle throwing rocks from the ground because Daniel had ordered everyone to remain useful. I stepped out wearing a single clean set of clothes. You handled it. Zuko looked almost offended by my surprise. You left us in command. I know. Knowing and seeing are different. Daniel held up the damaged shield. 4 red grooves crossed the front. Tier 2? I asked. He nodded. The corruption route had sent a probe. It had either noticed our earlier retreat or reacted to Pan's flight. More importantly, the creatures had used tactics. The Alliance note said the Root Guardian changed after consuming Deepwell's territory heart. Maybe it had gained more than raw strength. Where are Nami and Pan? Zuko pointed west. Nami had convinced Pan to carry her beyond the fruit grove during a local flight. They had disappeared outside the observation stone's range before the attack and had not returned. Zuko had chosen not to send a search group while the east remained active. It was the correct decision. I still hated it. We marked Pan again and watched the blank stone. Nothing. I forced myself to review the rest of Zuko's report instead of staring at it. Every unit had been fed. Dust spending was recorded. Patrol routes were mapped. The farms were intact. The daybread chutes had doubled in size. Zuko had even tracked arrow tower ammunition and placed the 6 spent shafts in a repair bin despite having no repair method. My commander had become an accountant while I was eating restaurant food. The loot from the attack included several orbs and enough soul dust for another mass upgrade. The evolution point pools had grown dramatically during my absence. Every basic skeleton and militia contributed on schedule whether I was present or not. I evolved 20 skeletons into warriors and 6 militia into spearmen. The clearing filled with white light. Weapons sharpened. Armor formed. Blank faces gained the first sparks of understanding. Daniel moved among the new warriors, checking stances and assigning them to experienced leaders. Craig did the same with the humans. Haven now had an army large enough that I could not recognize everyone. That should have felt like success. Instead, it made responsibility harder to count. I saved the remaining human points for Zuko. His next evolution cost more than the entire First Day army could have generated in a week. Thanks to our population, the total would be ready before night. While we waited, I told Zuko and Daniel what I learned on Earth. The real Lord Realm. The end of system conveniences. The Lord Alliance. Deepwell's final note. The Lord Tournament and Hero Orb. Zuko listened without interrupting. Daniel reacted to the tournament by pointing at himself. Yes, you would fight. He pointed at Zuko. Also yes. Then he pointed at me. I would supervise. Daniel crossed his arms. I am physically weaker than a 1-star militia. He continued staring. Fine. I will carry the sword. That satisfied him. Zuko focused on a different part. The units of Deepwell may still exist in the mine. Possibly. The route comes first. If its guardian absorbed their territory heart, every day may give it more time to use what it took. Then we should strike soon. Daniel hit the cracked face of his shield with one knuckle. Soon did not mean immediately. We needed repaired gear, food, energy, and every point the next cycle could provide. The root had tested Haven and learned something. I wanted our reply to teach it the wrong lesson about our strength. The observation stone lit. Sky spun across its surface. Treetops rushed below. Nami appeared at the bottom of Pan's view, flattened against the bird's neck. They were returning from the west. Behind them, far beyond the old goblin camp, smoke rose in several columns. Not a campfire. An entire goblin settlement. The western problem had grown while we watched the east. Pan landed hard enough to slide across the altar roof. Nami rolled from her back, caught herself in midair, and flew straight to me. She spoke in rapid bells while pointing west, drawing shapes with both hands and repeatedly demonstrating something tall. Zuko translated, walls, many huts, more goblins than she can count, something taller than the gate. Thaduen, how far? Nami held up both hands several times, became frustrated with numbers, and pointed at Pan. More than 10 kilometers, Zuko said. Far enough that they are not an immediate threat. The smoke meant industry. A large goblin settlement could organize patrols, expand east, and eventually discover the exchange scale or haven. It joined the cave and tournament on a growing list titled Problems for Later. I gave Nami the reward she understood best. No more long flights today. She looked crushed. After you rest, local flights with Pan are allowed. She recovered instantly and hugged Pan's neck. The falcon tolerated it with the exhausted patience of someone who had accepted a strange life. The human evolution pool reached Zuko's requirement before sunset. I called everyone important to the training ground. Zuko stood in the center holding his halberd. Daniel watched from the front with Haru beside him. Craig lined up the human officers. Nami sat between Pan's wings. Zuko, I said, you were the first person in this world to speak to me. You learned every skill before I understood the rules. You turned 5 confused militia into an army and defended Haven when I was not here. Zuko lowered his head. This is not a reward for following orders. It is an investment in the person who improves them. I activated evolution. The light lasted longer than any transformation before it. Silver plates reshaped around Zuko's body, becoming lighter and more fitted. The halberd's shaft darkened. Fine lines appeared along its blade like channels waiting to carry energy. Then a new entry appeared in his panel. The Cs2S, talent awakened, perfect understanding. Zuko opened his eyes. He looked at Daniel and spoke 3 sharp clicks. Daniel's jaw dropped open. Nami rose from Pan's back. Zuko answered her next burst of bells with a sequence of tones I could not reproduce. She flew around his head in a circle. You can speak to them? I asked. Not perfectly. I understand the structure now. He lifted one hand. Pale energy gathered above his palm without a weapon or named skill. The talent does not give me knowledge from nothing. It shows relationships between things I can observe. Energy, motion, language, intention. He turned toward the black metal document from the goblin camp. For several minutes, he studied it. Can you read it? No. There is no reference. Understanding patterns cannot invent meanings. That limitation was almost reassuring. Zuko tested his new control with the halberd. He extended the point using compressed energy, shortened it, widened it into a blade, and twisted the energy into a drill around the spear tip. Each form used the same power differently. Daniel challenged him before the tests ended. He did not say anything. He drew his sword, raised his repaired shield, and tapped the blade against it twice. Zuko smiled. One exchange? Daniel nodded. They faced each other across the training ground. Daniel charged first. His shield carried dark energy, the same stunning rush that had broken goblin minds. Zuko stepped half a pace aside, caught the shield edge with his halberd hook, and redirected the entire charge past him. Daniel turned with a sweeping cut. Zuko shortened his grip, blocked near the hilt, and touched the halberd point to Daniel's chest flame before the skeleton completed the swing. The exchange ended. Daniel stared at the blade. Then he sat on the ground and spread both hands in surrender. Haru rushed over, convinced something was wrong. Daniel waved him away and clicked a complaint at Zuko. Zuko translated for me. He says thinking that fast is unfair. Tell him I agree. Zuko did. Daniel pointed at me and clicked again. He says you are responsible. I withdraw my support. Daniel laughed. The spar looked one-sided, but it revealed something important. Zuko's raw strength had increased. His real advantage was prediction. He recognized the purpose behind Daniel's movement before the attack finished forming. Against mindless monsters, that talent could be devastating. Against a guardian that learned, it might be the difference between winning and understanding why we lost. Later, I found Daniel and Zuko alone near the graves we had made for 2 units, killed during patrols before my Earth trip. Daniel held dark energy between his hands, shaping it around a broken bone fragment. Zuko watched. What is he doing? I asked. Zuko answered quietly. Trying to move the soul flame outside his body. Daniel pointed at the grave, then at the energy. He remembered my old joke about learning resurrection. It was no longer a joke to him. Can it work? Zuko looked at the black energy. I do not know, but not understanding something is no longer proof that it is impossible. Daniel closed his hands around the failed attempt. Haru arrived carrying a replacement shield and sat beside him. Daniel placed one arm around the younger skeleton's shoulders. I left them there. The final raid would begin the next day. For the first time, I was afraid not only of losing my army, I was afraid of who would remain to understand the loss. Nami's next evolution transformed the fields. Her yellow flower opened into a layered white bloom. The leaf dress became woven petals, and green light followed her hands when she flew. Her new growth skill could accelerate an entire patch of crops. She cast it over the daybread field. Stalks rose. Blue lines appeared along the white fruit. The harvest timer dropped by almost 2 days. Nami landed in front of me expecting celebration. I gave it to her. Then I saw the energy cost. She could maintain the effect for 2 hours, cover only part of one field per cast, and needed significant rest afterward. The ability was powerful, but it did not replace farming. It improved organized farming. Nami saw the calculation on my face and began to sink. This changes everything, I said before she could misunderstand. It does not have to solve everything. Zuko translated exactly. Nami looked at the field, then at the other fairies. She divided them into groups without waiting for me. One spread pollen. One carried water. 2 rested. The next pair prepared to rotate in. She had learned the same lesson Daniel had learned with his skeletons. The strongest unit was not always the one doing the most work. Sometimes it was the one teaching everyone else how to contribute. By evening, the first daybread harvest was ready. Every human received 1 fruit. The fairies refused to eat anything else once they tasted it. Pan rejected it completely and stole a strip of meat from Craig. Craig watched the falcon swallow his dinner. Should I stop her? He asked. Pan opened her beak. You should protect the other half. He moved it behind his back. The army prepared in teams. Zuko assigned formations based on each officer's actual thinking ability, not only quality. Daniel paired slower skeletons with experienced ones. Haru received command of a 5-unit shield group. He checked the position of each shield 3 times. Daniel corrected him once, then stopped interfering. Craig commanded the second spear line. He had never gained Zuko's instinct for invention, but he remembered plans, kept formation under pressure, and protected anyone assigned to him. If the line breaks, Zuko asked during the briefing, close around the wounded. Give ground toward the left. Daniel's reserve strikes the gap. If Daniel is occupied, Haru's shields hold. We do not chase. Zuko nodded. Craig looked relieved by the approval, though he tried to hide it. I walked the preparations with a written list. Soul dust divided into healing packets. Daybread issued. Spare weapons loaded onto a cart. Pan marked for observation until we left the stone's range. Nami and the farm fairies ordered to remain at Haven with the weakest militia and 10 skeletons. Arrow Tower loaded. Northern and western lookouts doubled. Nami objected to being left behind. The west has a goblin city, I said. If we take every strong unit east, Haven needs someone who can see from above and restrain attackers until the tower fires. She pointed at Pan. Pan stays too. Pan had been pecking at her feathers. She looked up at the sound of her name. Nami considered the assignment, then saluted. The farm was no longer a place I kept her away from danger. It was part of the territory she had authority to defend. That distinction mattered to both of us. The leaderboard updated after the final mass evolution. Haven reached first place. Global chat exploded. People demanded to know how a territory had climbed from 41 to first in less than a week. Ryan, the previous leader, congratulated me publicly in a message that contained exactly enough politeness to feel like a challenge. I did not answer. First place did not weaken the root. It did make one dangerous thought easier to believe. We were strong enough. I had followed that thought before every risk so far. Each time, preparation turned it true. Tomorrow would test whether I had finally started believing it without evidence. After dark, I found Craig sharpening his spear beside Haru. They had no shared language, but Craig demonstrated a block, and Haru copied it with his shield. Haru scraped his sword along the shield rim, the new signal he and Daniel used for surround, and Craig repeated it for the human line. 2 officers from different species, teaching each other before a battle. Neither needed to understand emotionally in order to fear. You should rest, I told Craig. Zuko is still training. Across the clearing, Zuko and Daniel practiced merging pale and dark energy along the same weapon. The powers fought each other, producing sparks and violent tremors through the shaft. Zuko and Daniel are terrible examples of healthy rest. Craig smiled. They are our commanders. That does not make them sensible. Haru clicked agreement. Craig looked at him. I understood that. Haru clicked again. I left them with one final order. Tomorrow, surviving is more important than proving anything. Craig nodded. Haru struck his fist against his chest. The point cycle arrived at midnight. Our army grew one last time. At dawn, the gates of Haven opened. 87 fighters marched out of Haven. I counted them once at the gate, again at the eastern marker, and a third time when the trees closed behind us. Zuko noticed, but did not comment. Craig noticed and started counting his own line. Haru copied him without understanding the numbers, touching the rim of each skeleton's shield as they passed. We had gone into the forest with 5 militia on our first day. Now, 2 columns moved between the trees. Human spears caught the morning light on the left. Skeleton shields formed a dark, rattling wall on the right. A cart rolled in the center with daybread, soul dust, spare weapons, rope, and every healing item we owned. Daniel walked ahead of his warriors. Zuko moved wherever the trail narrowed, adjusting the formation before anyone became trapped. I walked where both commanders could reach me. That was not courage. It was a practical response to being the only person who could read the full enemy panels. Pan followed us for the first kilometer. Nami rode on her back with both hands buried in the falcon's feathers. They circled once above the army, then twice above me. Haven, I called. Nami pointed east. You already have an important job. She crossed her arms. Pan gave me the same offended stare she used whenever I protected my own food. If the goblins attack while we're gone, the arrow tower needs eyes. I need yours more than I need another pair here. Nami's expression changed. She saluted, turned Pan with a tug on the feathers, and flew west. I kept watching until the canopy hid them. Zuko looked back at me. She will defend it. I know, that was why leaving felt possible. The first half of the journey passed through living forest. Birds moved above us. Insects complained around the supply cart. The skeletons made enough noise to frighten away anything with ordinary survival instincts. 3 kilometers from the route, the sound stopped. There was no clear border this time. One tree carried green leaves, and the next held black ones. Moss faded into gray fibers. The soil hardened beneath our boots, and roots rose from it like veins under thin skin. Every unit felt the change. Daniel raised one hand. The skeleton line stopped. Zuko crouched beside a black root crossing the trail. He did not touch it. Pale energy gathered over 2 fingers, forming a thin edge. He sliced through the root. Dark liquid welled from the cut. Somewhere ahead, something screamed. Not an animal. The entire forest made the sound at once. The severed ends snapped toward Zuko's wrist. He pulled back before they closed, and Daniel crushed both pieces beneath his shield. Text appeared in front of me. Memwork disturbed. SS. The root is aware of the invading force. It knows we're here, I said. Craig glanced at 87 people wearing metal and carrying a cart. Was hiding an option? Not anymore. We advanced in a tighter formation. The first attack came from beneath us. Black cords burst through the soil between the human lines. One wrapped a spearman's ankle and dragged him down. Another coiled around the cartwheel. Dozens more rose along the trail, splitting into hooked tendrils. Shields inward, Craig shouted. Haru struck his shield once. The skeleton stopped without bunching. Daniel struck twice, and the front rank advanced over the roots, pinning them under shield rims while warriors behind chopped them apart. Zuko did not attack the nearest tendril. He studied the movement for 1 second, then drove his halberd into an empty patch of soil. Pale energy widened beneath the surface. The ground lifted. A pulsing knot the size of a barrel tore free with 20 roots attached to it. The tendrils around us spasmed. Zuko twisted the halberd, splitting the knot from within. Every root collapsed. How did you know? Craig asked. They pulled at different times but relaxed together, Zuko said. One center. Perfect understanding had begun changing the way he spoke. He no longer described only what he saw. He described why it had to work that way. Daniel picked up part of the dead knot and offered it to me. The panel called it a supporting vein. It strengthened the main root, carried commands to corrupted creatures, and allowed damaged sections of the forest to regenerate. Then it gave me the number remaining. Supporting veins, 11. I looked east. We don't just have to reach the center. 11 of these are feeding it. Zuko examined the branching roots. Not equally. What do you mean? He pointed at 3 thick lines disappearing into the forest. Smaller roots branched from each one. 3 groups. Break the main vein of each group, and the rest become isolated. That turned 11 targets into 3. It also required us to leave the road. We moved toward the first main vein in formation. The corruption sent wolves to slow us. They came in packs of 10, then 20, then 30, their bodies thin and their mouths leaking black foam. In the past, a single pack would have forced every fighter into one desperate line. Now Craig rotated the front rank before fatigue opened gaps. Daniel sent skeletons through the gaps to strike the wolves from the side. Zuko killed only the largest creatures, using narrow bursts of energy that passed through skulls without wasting strength. I watched the panels and called targets. Red stripe, left. 3 spears shifted before the 2-star wolf could leap. Burrower under the rear. Haru's shield group closed around the cart. The creature erupted beneath them and found 5 shield edges waiting. The army did not fight like 87 individuals. It moved like something we had spent a week teaching how to think. We found the first main vein wrapped around a dead cedar. It had grown a shell of black wood around itself and stationed 2 hulking boars nearby. Their tusks carried enough corruption to kill a basic unit with 1 wound. Daniel took the first charge on his shield. The impact drove him backward through the dirt. Haru's group launched shields behind him, catching their commander before he fell. Daniel turned the boar's head aside. Zuko stepped along the exposed neck and drove his halberd down between its shoulders. The second boar charged the human line. Craig did not try to stop it. "Open," he shouted. The line split. The boar entered the corridor, too heavy to turn. The spearman closed behind it and drove 12 points into its flanks. It reached the supply cart before it died. Craig reached the cart first and pulled the wounded driver away from its tusks. The fighters cheered. Zuko silenced them with one raised hand. The dead wolves were moving, not standing. Whacks off. Thin roots emerged from the soil, entered their wounds, and dragged the bodies toward the cedar. Black matter flowed out of them and into the shell around the vein. The damage Zuko had dealt to it began closing. "Burn the bodies," I shouted. We had no fire mage and only 2 jars of lamp oil. Zuko solved it differently. He placed his palm against the vein and released a short, violent pulse. The outer shell split. Daniel drove his sword into the opening. Pale and dark energy met inside the wood. The main vein burst. All the smaller roots around the battlefield went still. The corpses stopped moving. Proper ease supporting network reduced. 2 of 3 branches remain active. That was the good news. The bad news arrived from the direction we had planned to travel next. Hundreds of feet moved through the trees. The corruption had understood what we were doing. Zuko listened for several seconds. "It is protecting the other veins. Can we go around them? That is what it wants." He drew 3 lines in the dirt. The first represented our position. The other 2 angled north and south toward the remaining branches. Between them, he marked the enemy force. "It is leaving the center open," he said. Craig frowned. "Then we can reach the root. With both networks alive, every defender we kill will return its strength to the Guardian. Every wound will close." Zuko erased the open path with his hand. "It wants the Lord close before it traps the army." The root was not simply calling monsters toward danger. It was using the forest as a battlefield. "Then we make it think we're taking the open path," I said. Zuko looked at me. "We advance east. When the enemy closes behind us, Daniel breaks north with the skeletons. Craig takes the humans south. You and I stay visible long enough to keep the center focused on us." "The Lord does not stay visible," Zuko said. "The root already knows where I am. Knowing is not reaching." Daniel tapped his sword against his shield. Once, hard. He agreed with Zuko. Craig pretended to inspect his spear. "This is an unfortunate time for everyone to become independent." I changed the plan. Zuko would remain with the center. I would move with Daniel's shield group north, where I could identify the main vein. Craig would take the south branch with 24 humans. Zuko would control the reserve and reinforce whichever side met the larger defense. The 2 branch forces would separate for no more than 10 minutes. It was the widest division we had ever attempted inside corrupted territory. It was also the first plan that did not depend on Zuko personally solving every problem. We staged the false advance. The forest reacted exactly as Zuko predicted. Shapes gathered behind us. Wolves paced between trees. Broad-backed hyenas blocked the western trail. Something larger traveled with them, bending branches without showing itself. At Zuko's signal, the army split. Craig vanished south between gray trunks. Daniel turned north. Haru took the rear of the skeleton column, shields overlapping to hide my position. Zuko marched east with fewer than 30 fighters and made them sound like twice that number. The corrupted army hesitated. For 4 seconds, the forest did not know which part of us mattered most. 4 seconds was enough. Daniel's group found resistance after 200 meters. The forest narrowed around a trench filled with black water. On the other side, corrupted deer stood motionless between the trees. Their antlers had grown together into hooked cages. Smaller creatures crouched behind them. The panel above the nearest deer made the trap clear. Corrupted bulwark. Uncommon, level 4. Share guard, damage received by nearby corrupted units is divided among the herd. There were 12 of them. Killing one at a time would not work. Every strike would spread through the entire line, and the root would repair the weaker damage while we focused on the next target. "All together," I said. Daniel looked across the trench. The water was too wide to jump safely in armor. Black shapes moved beneath its surface. A fallen tree formed a bridge 30 meters to the east, which was exactly why the corrupted herd had left it untouched. Haru tapped Daniel's shield and pointed at the trench wall. Thick roots held the packed soil together. Daniel understood. The skeletons hooked swords and fingers beneath the roots. At his signal, the entire front rank pulled. Dirt collapsed into the water. The trench filled enough for the shield group to enter without sinking completely. The black shapes attacked. Long bodies wrapped around skeleton legs. Teeth scraped bone. Haru moved down the improvised crossing, striking shields and directing each group through before the water could pull them apart. The corrupted deer lowered their antlers. Daniel raised his sword. Every skeleton stopped. The herd charged. At the final moment, Daniel dropped the sword. The skeleton front rank knelt. The second rank planted shields over their backs. The antlers hit an angled wall instead of standing bodies. Several deer vaulted upward. Others tangled together. Daniel climbed the center shield and leaped. Dark energy spread from his blade in a wide arc. It struck all 12 deer at once. The shared damage had nowhere else to go. Every creature received the full divided impact at the same moment. Antlers shattered. Bodies fell into one another. Haru's warriors crossed the trench and finished the smaller defenders before they recovered from the collapse. Daniel had not learned perfect understanding. He had learned Zuko. We reached the northern vein with 6 minutes remaining. It hung beneath an arch of stone, pulsing too high for an ordinary sword. Daniel ordered 3 skeletons to form a base with their shields. Haru climbed onto them, raised his own shield overhead, and Daniel stepped onto it. The structure swayed. Daniel jumped from Haru's shield and caught the vein with one hand. His sword hacked into the black wood. The vein twisted, trying to throw him into the rocks. Haru climbed after him. Instead of attacking, he locked both arms around Daniel's legs. The younger skeleton anchored his commander long enough for the next strike to split the vein. Dark liquid rained over them. Supporting network reduced. 1 of 3 branches remains active. 1 remained. Craig's. The distant battle to the south had gone silent. I used the territory connection. The units beyond my sight appeared only as points of awareness, not clear images. Most were moving. 2 were injured. None had died. Then the whole southern group stopped. Craig, I whispered. Haru turned toward me. The forest shook. A roar rolled from the south, followed by the clash of metal and the sharp, organized rhythm of human voices. Craig's group had not stopped because it was defeated. It had formed a line. We ran toward them. The main trail no longer existed. Roots pushed through the earth behind us, rearranging the ground. Branches curved down to catch shields. The remaining network was concentrating all of its strength on preventing the 2 groups from meeting. Daniel cut the branches. Haru kept the column together. I followed the sound of Craig's commands. Metal struck flesh. A heavy impact cracked through the trees. We broke into a clearing and found 24 humans holding against something that should have scattered them. The creature resembled a bear only in size. 6 jointed legs carried a body covered in overlapping bark plates. Its head split vertically when it roared, exposing a ring of teeth around a red throat. Spears protruded from its shoulders, but black roots had grown around the shafts and trapped them in place. Corrupted root beast. Rare, level 6. Regrowth. Extreme. While connected to an active supporting vein, Craig had arranged the spearmen in 2 curved ranks. When the beast charged, the first rank struck and moved aside. The second hit its exposed flank. Nobody remained in front long enough to be crushed. It was the same quarter tactic he had used against the boar, expanded into a moving circle. The beast was learning the pattern. Its next charge stopped halfway. The body turned. A branch-like limb swept sideways toward the retreating first rank. Craig shoved 2 soldiers down and took the strike across his chest. His armor split. He hit the ground hard enough to lose his spear. The line wavered. "Hold!" Craig shouted from the dirt. They held. Daniel entered the clearing behind the beast. Haru struck his shield twice. The skeletons advanced. The root beast turned toward the new threat. That gave Craig's soldiers the breath they needed to pull him upright. He could stand, but his left arm hung against his side. "Where is the vein?" he asked. Not whether we could kill the beast. Not how badly he was hurt. The mission. I searched the panels. The creature's connection appeared as a dark line running beneath its plates and into the ground. It did not lead away from the clearing. It led into the creature. The vein is inside it. The remaining branch had grown its defense around itself. The root beast charged Daniel. His shield caught the split jaws, but 2 of the creature's legs struck around the edges. One tore through a skeleton warrior's shoulder. Another drove Daniel to one knee. Haru's group hit from the side. The beast swept them away. Zuko arrived before they landed. Pale energy extended from his halberd, in a line so thin I saw it only when it passed through the creature's rear leg. The severed limb struck the ground. Black roots immediately dragged it back toward the wound. Zuko cut those too. "It protects the body," he said. "The body protects the vein. Break both together." He assigned positions in seconds. Daniel and Haru would pin the head. Craig's line would strike the legs. Zuko would open the armor. I would call the location of the vein once it shifted. "It shifts?" Craig asked. The black line in my vision moved from the creature's chest toward its abdomen. Constantly. "Of course it does." Craig retrieved his spear with his working hand. The coordinated attack began. Daniel drove his shield into the vertical mouth. Haru locked his own shield over Daniel's, creating a double layer between the teeth. The root beast bit down. Metal bent. The human line struck its front legs at the joints. Zuko ran up one embedded spear and landed on the creature's back. His halberd hook tore a bark blade free. Black roots lashed toward him, but he changed the length of his energy blade with every cut. The tendrils could not judge his reach. "Left shoulder," I called. The vein fled the open wound. "Lower ribs." Zuko followed it with the point. The beast threw its body sideways. He jumped clear. Daniel and Haru released the jaws one instant before the full weight landed on them. Craig moved first. He set the base of his spear against the ground and aimed with one hand. The root beast charged him. Zuko's energy struck the opposite side of the armor. The plate exploded inward. Craig's spear entered the opening. The beast's weight drove the weapon through its own chest. For 1 second, everything stopped. Then the supporting vein split. The creature collapsed less than a meter from Craig. Supporting network disabled. S. Corruption regeneration reduced. Fest. Central Guardian has entered the battlefield. Zuko was already looking past me. The trees behind the skeleton line bent away from one another. A tall figure walked between them. It had the shape of a man stretched beyond human proportions. Black armor grew directly from its body. 4 arms ended in long, jointed hands, and a crown of bare branches curved behind its head. There was no face beneath the crown, only a smooth surface with a red vertical line where eyes should have been. The panel appeared slowly, as if the Lord Realm wanted to make certain I read every part. Corruption Guardian, rare, level 7. Probless. Wounds that fail to destroy the core will return as resistance. Assessed. Produced SISRES. May be reproduced. SR. The red line turned toward Zuko. One of the Guardian's hands opened. Pale energy formed around its fingers in the shape of a spear. It had watched us destroy every defense. Now it understood how. The Guardian attacked without crossing the clearing. Its pale spear stretched 30 meters in a blink. Zuko knocked me down before the point reached us. The energy passed over my shoulder, cut through 2 trees, and vanished inside the third. A smoking line remained through all of them. The Guardian had copied the shape of Zuko's thrust. It had not copied his restraint. Daniel charged. His shield struck the Guardian's lower arms. Dark energy burst at the point of impact, stunning corrupted creatures that had followed it through the trees. The Guardian slid backward. One upper hand caught Daniel's sword. The other touched his shield. Dark energy flashed from both palms. Daniel flew across the clearing and struck the dead root beast hard enough to crack one of its armor plates. The Guardian had seen his charge once. Now it could use that too. Do not repeat attacks, I shouted. That was easy to say to an army trained through repetition. Zuko reached the Guardian with 3 changes of reach. His halberd began short, extended toward the chest, then bent around a blocking arm as the energy edge widened into a hook. The hook tore through black armor. Red light appeared beneath it. The Guardian caught the halberd shaft with 2 hands. Zuko released the weapon, stepped inside its reach, and struck the exposed wound with his palm. Compressed energy exploded into the torso. Before the Guardian could close its arms, he caught the falling halberd and rolled away. The wound began sealing. The panel changed. Resistance acquired, piercing energy, not immunity. Every failed attack made the next one less effective. The armor learns from the damage, I said. The core doesn't. Red light in the chest. Zuko nodded once. The Guardian turned away from him. It looked at me. Understanding the battle meant understanding why Zuko kept listening to the weakest person in it. The Guardian stepped forward. Haru's shield group closed around me before I gave an order. 5 shields overlapped. The copied spear struck the center and drove all 6 of us backward. Metal bent. Haru held. The second strike came from below. Roots erupted under the formation. I fell between 2 shields. Haru caught the back of my armor and threw me toward Daniel. The Guardian entered the broken line. Zuko attacked its back. Daniel attacked from the front. Pale and dark energy struck different pieces of armor, forcing the creature to divide 4 arms between 2 threats. That was when the rest of the corrupted army arrived. Wolves poured between the trees. Hyenas followed them. Root tendrils crawled over the ground even though their supporting network was dead. They moved more slowly now, but there were hundreds. Craig wiped blood from his mouth. Humans with me. His left arm was useless. He held his spear in the right and ran toward the western edge of the clearing. Daniel clicked 3 commands without looking away from the Guardian. Half the skeletons followed Craig. The others formed a ring around the central fight. The battlefield separated into 2 struggles. Zuko and Daniel had to destroy a creature that improved every time they failed. Everyone else had to keep hundreds of enemies from teaching it with our deaths. I moved to the edge of the inner ring and called information from the panels. Level 3 pack north. Craig turned the human line before the larger wolves reached the flank. Burrowers behind the cart. Skeletons planted swords in the ground. The burrowers surfaced into a cage of blades. Red throat on the Guardian. The core moved up. Daniel struck high. The Guardian raised both lower arms to block him. Zuko changed direction and cut through a knee. The leg collapsed. The Guardian grew a 5th arm from the wound. It was smaller than the others and unfinished, but it caught Zuko's ankle. Daniel severed it before the creature could pull him close. Resistance acquired. Dark Disruption.os. It can turn damage into new growth, Zuko said, only while the core survives. Then the first complete opening must be the last. He stopped attacking. Daniel understood and changed with him. Instead of trying to injure the Guardian, they controlled its arms. Zuko hooked joints and pulled them away from Daniel. Daniel used his shield to trap hands against the torso. Every motion created an opening but refused to spend it. They were waiting until all 4 original arms could be controlled at once. The Guardian understood that too. It abandoned them and rushed the human line. Craig saw it coming. Open. The spearmen split into 2 ranks. The Guardian did not enter the corridor. It stopped and drove both upper hands into the ground. Black spikes erupted beneath the soldiers on either side. The formation scattered. A copied dark pulse followed. 6 humans fell. Corrupted wolves reached the gap before they could stand. Craig stepped into it alone. His spear moved one-handed, not with Zuko's speed, but with the economy of someone who had practiced the same motions thousands of times. He stabbed the first wolf through the mouth, turned the shaft, and used its body to block the second. A third bit through the armor on his leg. He stayed upright. "Close around the wounded," he shouted. The words came from Zuko's question the night before. The line closed. Soldiers dragged the 6 fallen humans away. Skeleton shields sealed the opening. Craig gave ground toward the left exactly as planned. The Guardian followed him. It had mistaken the retreat for weakness. Craig looked at Zuko over the creature's shoulder. Then he smiled. He had created the opening. Zuko moved. Daniel struck the Guardian from behind with his shield. The stunning rush forced its upper arms outward. Zuko's halberd hook captured the lower right arm. Haru's shield group hit the lower left. For one instant, every arm was controlled. The red core glowed behind the armor in its chest. Craig turned his spear toward it. The Guardian's 5th arm grew again from the damaged knee. The narrow hand punched through Craig's armor before anyone saw it finish forming. He did not drop the spear. He stepped closer. The new arm passed through him. Craig trapped it between his body and his useless left arm, holding the Guardian in place. "Order, now," he said. Zuko's halberd entered the red core. Pale energy exploded through the Guardian's back. Every corrupted creature in the clearing collapsed. The root tendrils fell flat. Craig fell with them. I reached him before his soldiers did. There was no healing packet large enough for the wound. The point pool could evolve humans, not reverse death. I pressed soul dust against the broken armor anyway. Craig looked toward the line he had closed. All 6 wounded soldiers were alive. "Did we hold?" he asked. He released the Guardian's arm. His eyes stopped focusing. The clearing remained silent. Zuko stood over the Guardian with both hands on the halberd. Daniel knelt beside Craig. Haru lowered his shield. I waited for the system message. No reward appeared. The panel over the Guardian remained. Core integrity, 4%. The red light inside its chest moved around the halberd blade. Black armor closed over the weapon. He tried to pull free. The Guardian's hand closed around his throat. The creature stood. Its broken knee repaired itself. The 5th arm remained. A 6th grew from the wound in its back. The branch crown doubled in size, and black plates layered over the hole in its chest. Every injury we had given it returned as armor. Adaptive growth complete. Ishchu. Corruption Guardian. Rare. Level 8s. It lifted Zuko from the ground with his own halberd trapped inside its body. Then the entire corrupted army opened its eyes again. Daniel hit the Guardian hard enough to release Zuko. His shield caught one of its new arms. The impact shattered the outer layer of metal and exposed his forearm bones. The Guardian caught him with 2 other hands and threw him through the skeleton ring. The revived creatures rose more slowly than before, but they rose stronger. New bark covered the wolves' skulls. The hyenas dragged roots behind them like tails. The root had pulled Craig's death into its own recovery. Zuko landed beside me without his weapon. For the first time since he learned thrust, his hands were empty. "Can you reach the core?" I asked. "Not with the same attack." The Guardian tore the halberd out through its back. Black armor had grown around the blade, turning our weapon into part of its body. It swung once. The energy edge extended across the clearing. 2 spearmen failed to duck in time. Both died where they stood. Their armor cut open before either could raise a weapon. 4 skeleton warriors broke under the same strike. Their soul flames went dark before their bones reached the ground. The Guardian had used Zuko's weapon better than it understood why he carried it. Haru saw the halberd turn toward Daniel. He struck his shield once. "Good up." Daniel froze at the command he had taught him. Haru ran past. The copied thrust hit his shield. The metal folded around him. His feet left the ground, but the energy point did not reach Daniel. Haru crashed into the dead cedar at the edge of the clearing. His shield fell in 2 pieces. Daniel reached him and lifted the younger skeleton's upper body. Haru's chest flame flickered. One arm moved, searching until it found the rim of Daniel's broken shield. He tapped it twice. Advance. Then the light went out. Daniel did not move. The battle continued around him. Wolves struck the human line. Skeletons closed over their fallen units. Zuko searched the ground for a weapon. The Guardian walked toward us carrying the halberd. Daniel held Haru as if waiting for another command. I wanted to tell him there was no time. I could not make the words leave my mouth. Zuko could. "He told you to advance." Daniel's head lifted. Dark energy poured from his soul flame. It did not spread across his sword or shield. It wrapped his entire body. Cracks ran through both pieces of armor. The air around him shook. He placed Haru beside Craig. Then he advanced. The Guardian stabbed with the halberd. Daniel let it enter his shield. The blade passed through 3 layers of metal and stopped against his left arm. He locked the broken shield around the shaft. The Guardian tried to withdraw it. Daniel pulled instead. Dark energy raced along the weapon into the creature's hands. The Guardian released 1 hand, then 2. Resistance slowed the disruption but did not stop it. Daniel kept pulling until the trapped blade split the bones of his left forearm. He did not release it. Zuko caught the exposed end of the shaft. Pale energy entered from one side. Dark energy entered from the other. The 2 powers had rejected each other during every training attempt. They sparked, twisted, and threatened to break the weapon. Zuko had always stopped before the reaction became unstable. Now instability was the point. The Guardian sensed the change. All 6 arms closed around the halberd. "It will adapt," I said. Zuko's face strained. "Only if it survives the first one." The weapon began to scream. Light and darkness spiraled together around the shaft, not blended, compressed. Each power tried to escape the other, and Zuko's understanding forced both toward the center. Daniel's broken arm separated at the elbow. He caught the halberd with his remaining hand. The Guardian pulled. Zuko was dragged across the dirt. His boots cut 2 lines toward the creature. The energy around the weapon became a white-black sphere large enough to hide the blade. "The core moved," I shouted. "Behind the throat plate." The Guardian turned one arm toward me. Daniel struck it with his head. The blow did no damage. It changed the aim. Zuko reached the end of his control. "Let go," he shouted. Daniel released the weapon and threw himself over Haru's body. Zuko did not release it. He used the Guardian's pole to run forward, planted one foot against its chest, and ripped the halberd free of the armor. The compressed energy came with it. For half a second, he stood close enough for all 6 hands to catch him. Then he threw the halberd into the Guardian's throat. The creature copied thrust. Pale energy extended the weapon through its own body. Zuko smiled. The Guardian had learned the wrong lesson. The halberd exploded. White light erased the clearing. Dark energy followed, pulling the light inward before releasing it in a ring. I hit the ground. Dirt and broken armor passed over me. Trees bent away from the center. For several seconds, I heard nothing. Then sound returned as a high, painful tone. Zuko lay 10 meters from the blast with smoke rising from his armor. Daniel was on one knee over Haru. Human and skeleton lines remained standing at the edge of the clearing. The Guardian did not. Pieces of black armor covered the ground. Every fragment was fading into gray dust. At the center of the crater, a red crystal pulsed once. Then it cracked. Central Guardian destroyed. S. Corruption Network has lost all defensive control. The revived creatures fell for the final time. Nobody cheered. Zuko crawled toward the crater and searched through the fragments. "The weapon is gone," he said. I reached him and checked the panel above his shoulder. "Burns. Energy exhaustion. Cracked ribs. Alive. Weapons can be replaced." He looked past me at Craig. "Not everything can." Daniel lifted Haru with one arm. The younger skeleton's shield pieces rested across his chest. We had won the battlefield. The corruption route still waited beyond it. There were no defenders left between us and the center. The forest did not move to stop us. Black roots lay exposed across the ground, twitching without purpose. I considered sending the army home and returning after we recovered. The system answered that thought before I acted on it. Warning: a defenseless corruption route will begin forming a replacement Guardian in 5 hours, 59 minutes. Zuko forced himself upright. Daniel turned east with Haru in his arm. Craig's soldiers lifted their dead commander onto the supply cart. The army reformed around them. This time, when I counted, 79 answered the march. The center of the corrupted forest was quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Black vines covered the ground in layers. Without the supporting network, they could no longer strike, but they still tightened when we stepped on them. Dead trees leaned toward the same point ahead. Their branches tangled overhead, forming a tunnel wide enough for the army. At its end stood the corruption root. It did not resemble an ordinary root or tree. A black trunk rose from a pit and divided into hundreds of cords before entering the soil again. The cords pulsed in sequence, drawing gray energy out of the forest and sending it into a red knot suspended inside the trunk. The knot was larger than the Guardian's core. Shapes moved behind its surface. Fakes. Some human, some not. They appeared for less than a second before sinking back into the red light. The panel covered most of my vision. Corruption root. Rare-EX. State, defenseless. Guardian reconstruction, 5 hours, 21 minutes. Purification requires uninterrupted contact from a territory lord. She. Estimated duration, 10 minutes. 10 minutes was nothing compared with the battle behind us. It still meant placing my hand on the thing that had controlled every creature in the forest. Zuko picked up a spare spear from the cart. The weapon looked too small after the halberd, but his hand settled around it without complaint. "We circled the pit," he said. "No one steps on a cord unless necessary. Daniel guards the lord." Daniel still carried Haru. Zuko paused. Daniel looked at the root, then at the younger skeleton in his arm. He crossed to the supply cart and placed Haru beside Craig. The 2 broken shields remained over Haru's chest. Then Daniel returned to me. His left arm ended below the elbow. His shield was barely large enough to cover his ribs. He raised it anyway. The army formed its final ring. I climbed into the pit. The root reacted when I came within reach. Bases pressed against the red knot. The cords beneath my boots contracted and pulled the trunk lower, as if it could hide inside the earth. There was nowhere left for it to go. I placed my palm against the black surface. Cold entered my arm. The forest disappeared. I stood inside a stone room lit by blue crystals. Men and women moved crates toward a trapdoor. A crest shaped like a split mountain had been carved over it. Deepwell, the previous lord, stood at the center. I never saw his face clearly. Every time he turned, black threads crossed my vision. The western line is gone, someone told him. The Guardian reached the village, then closed the mine. There are still people outside. The previous lord looked toward the ceiling as something heavy struck the building above them. If we leave it open, the root gets everyone below too. The vision changed. A stone door closed. Hands struck it from the other side. The blue crystals went dark one by one. Then I saw the same room covered in roots. The corruption root had not created the images. It had consumed them. Another memory replaced the first. Craig stood in the clearing with the Guardian's arm through his chest. Did we hold? I tried to pull my hand away. My arm did not move. Black lines had spread over my wrist. The root showed Haru's shield folding, the dead spearmen, the skeleton flames going dark. It replayed every failure from a different angle, including details I had not seen. It had watched all of them. It wanted me to stop the purification, not because it could overpower me, but because grief had already taught me to retreat from pain. You do not get to keep them, I said. White light appeared beneath my palm. The black lines on my wrist stopped. Purification initiated. Igo is Chivan Daka. The root screamed. Every cord in the pit lifted. The outer ring moved before I could warn them. Spears pinned thick cords. Skeleton swords severed smaller ones. Zuko's pale energy swept around the trunk in a narrow circle, cutting anything that reached for my arm. Daniel stood behind me. A root struck his damaged shield. The remaining metal broke away. He caught the tendril with his right hand and held it against his chest, while white fire spread along its length. The timer continued. An hour over 39. Memories passed through me faster. Other armies. Other lords. A woman kneeling beside a blue banner. A goblin wearing a territory crest. A child-sized stone creature hiding under a cart. Every person and unit the root had taken remained as a fragment inside it. I could not save them. Purification did not restore bodies or turn death backward. It stripped the corruption from what remained and released the energy the root had trapped. That truth hurt more than a miracle would have. It was also more honest. The red knot cracked. Gray light escaped through the split and rose into the dead trees. Wherever it passed, black leaves turned to ash. Brown bark appeared beneath the corruption. The ground softened under the army's feet. The root pulled one final memory forward. Paru sat beside Daniel at the graves near Haven. He held the replacement shield Craig had helped him carry. Daniel placed an arm over his shoulders. The scene was not mine. The root had watched through the creatures at the forest border. Daniel saw my face change. He tightened his grip on the tendril. Haru, I told him. The skeleton's soul flame flared. The trapped root broke in his hand. Zuko called the count aloud. The entire army joined him. 59. Humans spoke the numbers. Skeletons struck weapons against shields for each second. The sound rolled through the forest, steady and deliberate. The trunk split from top to bottom. The faces behind the red knot rose like reflections leaving water. Lemon. The black surface beneath my hand turned white. Eerie. Daniel released the dead tendril. Zuko lowered his spear. 1. Light filled the pit. The corruption root dissolved. No explosion followed. No last creature emerged. The enormous trunk collapsed into clean gray dust, and the red knot broke into hundreds of clear fragments. Wind moved through the center of the forest for the first time. Corruption root purified. Is. Current trial threat reduced. Bodis Wes. First purification achieved in this trial region. Territory Haven awarded. Desi Wes. This 20 crystal fragments. Resource dungeon. Token. Prast. Harrow, trial certificate. Each 4. Tournament scrolls. Masters Caston. Masters Caston. The items appeared inside the pit. The hero trial certificate was a white metal plate with a human figure engraved on one side. Its description said it could open a trial for one qualified unit. Success would turn that unit into a hero with an independent growth path. Failure could kill them. I looked at Zuko. He was helping Craig's soldiers secure the body to the cart. He did not see the certificate, and I did not call him over. Not yet. The tournament scroll carried a red seal and the words, Trial Day 6 Trials. It promised rewards for territories that entered and said nothing about what losing would cost. The resource dungeon token was simpler. Mana Parades. Creates one renewable resource dungeon linked to the territory. Available once every 7 days. Resource type selected at activation. Is iron, food, crystal fragments, soul dust. Each option could change Haven. The purified heart seed could claim the cleansed site as a future outpost after we built a road connecting it to our territory. Yesterday, every reward would have sent me into hours of plans. I placed them in the supply cart beside the dead. The army gathered the clear fragments and whatever weapons had survived. We did not convert the remains. We did not celebrate the rank message that announced Haven's purification to every lord in the region. We began the journey home. The forest changed around us as we walked. Gray moss became green. Black water cleared at the edges. Birds did not return, but insects did, one uncertain sound at a time. Daniel walked beside the cart. He kept one hand on Haru's broken shield. Zuko led with the spare spear. I counted 79 at the living forest border. I counted 79 again when Haven's wall appeared between the trees. Pan saw us first. She gave one sharp cry and dived from the arrow tower. Nami followed, white petals streaming behind her. The gates opened. People began cheering when they saw the army. Then they saw the cart. The sound ended before we reached the first house. We buried the humans at sunrise. Craig's grave stood at the center. His spear rested across the open earth while every soldier passed it. Some touched the shaft. Others only stopped long enough to look at the weapon he had carried from the first week of Haven to the clearing where he died. The two spearmen lay on either side of him. I had known their faces. I had evolved them, watched them train, and assigned them places in the march. I had never learned what they would have named themselves if they had reached the same awareness as Zuko or Craig. That did not make their deaths smaller. It made my failure to know them larger. Nami flew over each grave and opened both hands. White petals drifted from her dress. Wherever they touched the soil, thin green stems emerged. She exhausted her growth skill before the third grave was covered. The other fairies carried her to the side and continued planting by hand. Pan perched on Craig's spear until the final moment. When the soldiers lifted it, she flew to the gate and watched from there. The skeleton funeral happened beside the human one. We had no tradition for skeletons. Daniel created it. He arranged the fallen warriors with their swords over their ribs. Their bones had not decayed, but the warmth inside them was gone. The system called the bodies empty vessels. It offered no explanation for where the soul flames went. Haru lay closest to Daniel. His shield had broken into 3 pieces during the march home. Daniel fitted them together over his chest as carefully as if repairing the metal could repair the person beneath it. Then he opened one of our healing packets. Soul dust spilled over Haru's ribs. Nothing happened. Daniel pressed the dust into the center of the chest. Dark energy gathered in his remaining hand. It flowed through Haru's bones, searching for a flame that was no longer there. For one moment, a black spark appeared. Daniel froze. The spark faded. He tried again. Zuko took one step toward him. I stopped him. Daniel used the entire packet. Then a second. He drew so much power from his own soul flame that cracks appeared around it. The system panel never changed. Skeleton warrior. Deceased. Evolution. Unavailable. When Daniel reached for a third packet, I knelt beside him. If you empty your flame, Haru will still be gone. He held the packet. And we lose you too. His fingers closed around it. For several seconds, I thought he would ignore me. Then he placed the packet on the ground. Daniel pointed at Haru, at the dust, and at the dark energy inside his own chest. His fingers formed a circle, broke it, and brought the pieces back together. Zuko translated quietly. He says the spark was not Haru, but it was something. I saw it. Daniel pointed at me. The question required no translation. Could I bring him back? I could have lied. I could have called it impossible and closed the wound with certainty. I could have promised success and replaced certainty with hope. Neither answer belonged to me. I don't know, I said. But if soul flames can be created, moved, and strengthened, then there are rules we haven't learned. We will learn them. Daniel looked down at Haru. I will not promise we can reverse death. I will promise we won't stop at the first answer. He extended his remaining hand. I took it. We buried the skeletons with their weapons. Daniel kept one piece of Haru's shield. He carved the stop and advance signals into it and hung it from his belt. Haven gained 8 graves that morning. By noon, the system had turned our victory into public information. Every lord received the announcement that Haven had completed the first purification in the trial region. The leaderboard added a gold mark beside our name. My inbox filled so quickly that messages overlapped. Some offered congratulations. Some offered alliances that did not exist 5 minutes earlier. Several demanded a guide. Ryan asked how many rare units I had lost. When I did not answer, he sent a second message offering to trade information about the tournament scroll. I closed the chat. Doran's message arrived through the private alliance channel. Pressed. You survived. Report when ready. Do not post the root rewards publicly, especially not the hero trial certificate data stressed. I wrote back. 8 units died. We purified it. Deepwell memories were inside. The mine was sealed with survivors below. His mission. His answer took longer. Producing AI. Root preserving recognizable memories is unusual. Tell no one else until we know whether the mine and Root shared a network. Deepwell vanished more than 30 years ago by Earth time. If anything survived underground, do not open it without support. 30 years on Earth. The marks in the cellar had counted little more than a month in the Lord realm. I added time to the list of things this world did not explain fairly. The Rude victory unlocked new construction at the territory heart. Most options cost materials we did not own. One became possible because of the clear fragments we carried home. Thunder Tower, all RF. Long-range territory defense. Fires a concentrated lightning strike at a marked hostile target. As cost, 100 crystal fragments, 300 stone, 100 iron. Pressed H reserve, recharge, 2 hours H reserve capacity, 3 charges. The description separated recharge from reserve. The tower could store 3 shots, but anyone observing a single attack might assume it could not fire again for 2 hours. A visible weakness hiding 3 immediate strikes. I understood why the Alliance Guide had warned against revealing complete building panels. Construction took 3 days. We did not spend those days pretending the dead had been replaced. New units came through the exchange scale. Point cycles continued. Humans and skeletons evolved. The army regained its numbers before the tower foundation dried. Craig's absence remained obvious every time the second spear line waited for an order. Zuko chose 3 experienced spearmen to divide the responsibility. None received Craig's title. When I asked why, he looked toward the graves. Because I do not need another Craig, he said. I need them to become themselves. Daniel trained his warriors one-handed, until his arm regenerated through evolution. He no longer used only Haru's original stop and advance commands. He kept Haru's scrape along the rim for surround, and added a 3rd strike for withdraw. The old commands remained carved into the shield piece at his belt. Nami organized workers around the tower project and expanded the daybread fields. Pan made 2 western flights every day. The Goblin City had noticed our army leaving and returning. Scouts approached Haven, counted the defenders, and retreated before the arrow tower could reach them. They were preparing something. So were we. The new wall extended half a kilometer across Haven's most exposed western side. Stone covered the central gate. Ditches angled toward 2 narrow approaches, both visible from the Thunder Tower. Daniel's skeletons worked at night. Human teams took over at dawn. Nami's fairies grew roots through the soil beneath the foundation to prevent burrowers from loosening it. Pan contributed by stealing 3 measuring cords and dropping them on the tower roof. Nobody discovered why. On the 3rd evening, the Thunder Tower activated. Silver lines ran through a column of dark stone. A crystal array opened at the top like 4 metal wings. The territory heart filled all 3 reserve slots one after another. The tower needed a target. Pan found one. A corrupted wolf had wandered from the recovering eastern forest and reached the edge of our territory. It was weak enough for any spearman to kill. I marked it anyway. The tower made no dramatic noise while charging. The 4 wings turned. A thin silver line appeared between the array and the wolf. Lightning followed the line. The creature vanished inside white light. Soil exploded beneath it. When my sight cleared, a glass-edged crater remained. Every worker on the wall stared at the tower. Pan screamed at it. Tell her not to challenge the lightning, I said. Zuko looked at Nami. Nami looked at Pan. Pan screamed again. She has declined, Zuko said. The tower panel showed 1 charge spent, 2 ready, and a refill timer visible only to me. Against the Goblin City, 3 strikes would not win a war. They could remove 3 leaders, break 3 siege engines, or turn 1 confident attack into panic. That was enough to change how the West looked from the wall. After the test, I took Zuko to the territory heart. The hero trial certificate rested on the stone table. I had read its description every day since the root battle. Nothing new appeared. Zuko read the question on my face before I spoke. For me? Ethan the Phi. He touched the engraved figure. White light traced the shape of a halberd in its hands, then changed to the spare spear Zuko carried. Compatible candidate recognized. 6. Estimated difficulty, extreme. The system had called the Root Guardian rare and level 8. It had never called that fight extreme. We don't have to use it, I said. Not now, maybe not at all. You planned to use it when you picked it up. I plan to give you the choice. Zuko studied the certificate. If I succeed, I become stronger before the tournament and the Western attack. If you fail, Haven loses you before both. Those statements are the same reason viewed from opposite sides. That sounded exactly like something perfect understanding would decide. What do you want? I asked. He looked through the open door toward the new wall. Daniel was teaching skeletons below it. Nami's fairies carried daybread into storage. Pan sat on the Thunder Tower where the lightning had emerged, because fear and judgment continued to avoid her equally. I want enough strength that the next Craig does not need to create an opening with his life. He pushed the certificate back toward me. But Daniel should enter the resource dungeon first. That surprised me. Why? Because I know what my next path is. He does not. And if we open the hero trial while he is trying to follow Haru into death, Haven may lose both commanders. Zuko had noticed the cracks around Daniel's soul flame too. I returned the certificate to storage. The resource dungeon token offered 4 resource types based on Haven's current needs. Iron would finish more walls. Crystal fragments would charge magical construction. Food would support another population increase. Soul dust could recruit units. heal spiritual injuries, and feed Daniel's experiments. It was also the only option whose description contained a warning. Soul dust dungeons respond to the intentions of those who harvest them. I selected it. The token dissolved above the territory heart. A stone doorway rose from the ground outside Haven's eastern gate. Gray light filled the empty frame. Above it, a timer appeared at 6 hours. Once the doorway closed, the dungeon would take 7 days to reopen. For the first time since the root fell, Daniel left the graves. The dungeon allowed 10 entrants. I chose 7. Zuko carried a new iron spear while the smiths worked on a replacement halberd. Daniel wore a round shield fitted to his regenerated left arm and kept Haru's broken shield piece at his belt. Nami came because the warning mentioned intention, and no one in Haven understood how magic affected living systems better than she did. Pan came because Nami refused to enter without her. The Falcon walked through the gray doorway first. I followed with 2 experienced spearmen behind me. If the dungeon punished small groups, we had 3 empty spaces. If it trapped everyone who entered, Haven kept both commanders of the second line and its entire defensive army. That was how planning changed after a funeral. The gray light felt like cold rain. One step carried us out of the forest and onto a barren plain. There was no doorway behind us. A dull sky stretched in every direction without sun or clouds. The ground was made of pale dust, packed into low dunes. Gray particles drifted through the air but never fell. Nothing grew. Nothing moved. Pan launched from Nami's shoulder. She climbed until she became a dark point against the sky, circled once, and returned immediately. That worried me more than if she had stayed to explore. Nami held up both hands. Let's. The same terrain in every direction. A dungeon panel appeared. Soul Dust Field. Time remaining, 5 hours, 59 minutes. See exit will reopen when the party harvests 1 complete deposit or abandons the attempt. Su S. Quarterators. Dottis Quarterators Schwartz's. Morning deposits take form from the strongest intention within range. The field did not contain a visible deposit. Daniel was already staring at the dust. We know which intention is strongest, Zuko said. Daniel knelt and placed his hand on the ground. Dark energy spread through the pale surface. The nearest dune collapsed. Dust flowed toward Daniel's fingers. It gathered in front of him, rose into a thin column and divided into arms and legs. A round shield formed on one side. The head turned toward us with 2 empty eye sockets. Haru stood on the plain, not his body. Not exactly. The shape was made entirely of gray dust. Light flickered inside its ribs, too pale to be a soul flame. The shield had no scratches. Every bone was complete. Daniel stopped breathing even though he had never needed to breathe. The 2 spearmen raised their weapons. Wait, I said. A panel appeared over the figure. Memory echo. Harris S. Worse. Intentional imprint and residual. Root memory S. Worse presence. Nunnicus deposit integrity. 12% worse. It was built partly from Daniel's memory and partly from what the root had kept. Accurate enough to stand like Haru. Empty enough for the system to say so without hesitation. The echo struck its shield once. Stop. Daniel's hand trembled. It struck twice. Advance. The last command Haru had given him. Daniel stepped forward. Zuko blocked him with the spear shaft. Dark energy gathered around Daniel's hand. Look at the shield, Zuko said. Daniel did not. Haru carried the replacement from the graves to training. The lower edge was bent. He held it farther left because the balance changed. The echo held a perfect shield and a perfect central guard. It knows what the root saw, Zuko continued. It knows what you want to see. It does not know what Haru learned when the root was not watching. Daniel's energy faded. Zuko removed the spear. The echo tapped twice again. Daniel drew his sword. The dust figure opened both arms. For one terrible instant, it looked like Haru expected an embrace. Daniel scraped his sword along the rim of his shield. The private signal. Around. The echo did nothing. Daniel struck. His sword passed through the pale chest. The false flame broke apart. Dust collapsed around his feet. The panel changed. Deposit integrity, 11%. We had destroyed the shape, not the deposit. The dust began gathering again. This time, Craig rose from it. He wore the armor from the final battle. There was no wound in his chest. His spear rested on one shoulder. The echo looked at me. Did we hold? It asked. My answer lodged in my throat. Zuko stepped between us. It is using the last words the root heard. I know. The echo smiled. The real Craig had smiled before he created the opening. The expression was close, but the timing was wrong. This smile waited for my reaction. The dungeon was not showing us the dead. It was testing how badly we wanted the imitation. You held, I said. Craig's echo lowered the spear. Then why did you bring me back? I didn't. The gray figure tilted its head. And you are not him. The smile disappeared. The echo attacked. Its spear moved with Craig's practiced economy. Zuko blocked the first thrust and turned it aside. Daniel struck the shaft, breaking the dust weapon in half. Nami swept both hands forward. Green light passed through the echo. Nothing happened. Then pale blue threads appeared inside the gray body. Nami pointed. The deposit did not hide in the chest. It existed as a network through the entire form, like roots through soil. All points together, I said. The same solution Daniel had used against the shared herd. Zuko understood. He widened the energy around his spear into a flat ring. Daniel's dark power covered the opposite side. Nami's green threads held the network visible. They struck at the same time. Craig's echo burst into a cloud. The blue threads remained. Daniel caught one in his hand. Zuko gathered another along the spear point. Nami pulled the rest into a tight knot with her magic. The network condensed. A gray crystal dropped into my palm. Complete soul dust deposit harvested. Street 20 units. Yield 240 units of high purity soul dust. Exit. Condition satisfied. The doorway reappeared 200 meters behind us. Nobody moved toward it. 240 dust was enough to heal Daniel's spiritual cracks and recruit several units. It was more than most days of hunting had earned. It was not enough to justify a 6-hour dungeon with 10 available entrants. That was a small deposit, Zuko said. I looked at the panel. The label confirmed it. We had harvested one complete deposit, not the complete deposit. Nami had reached the same conclusion. She flew low over the ground, tracing the pale blue residue left by her spell. It disappeared under the next dune, then divided into dozens of lines. Roots. Pan climbed again. This time, Nami held a thread of green magic around one of her feathers. Their bond stretched the spell upward. A pattern appeared across the plain, too large to see from the ground. Nami's eyes widened. She landed and pulled at my sleeve. Her hands moved quickly, circle, lines, center, below. Zuko watched once. The dunes are connected, he said. Every deposit is part of one body. The ground shifted beneath us. Gray dust slid down the nearest dune. A smooth black surface emerged. I thought it was stone until it moved upward and carried half the dune with it. An eyelid opened. The eye beneath it was larger than Haven's Gate. Pan dropped from the sky. Nami caught a leg and was pulled several meters before the falcon managed to land. Lines appeared across the horizon. They were not cracks. They were fingers buried under the plain. The 7 of us stood on the chest of something colossal. The first deposit had been a loose piece of dust lying near its skin. The rest was inside it. A new panel replaced the field description. Keeper of the Dust. Sealed Dungeon Guardian. Awakening condition. A collector rejects a desired echo. Iconnexon's intention detected. Restore the dead. Dardian response. Unrestricted time. Remaining. 5 hours, 31 minutes. The buried creature inhaled. Every drifting particle stopped in the air. Then the entire sky began falling toward its open mouth. The exit still waited behind us. We could leave with 240 dust, seal the doorway, and return in 7 days. It was the safe decision. Haven had a Western enemy, a tournament approaching, and a hero trial certificate dangerous enough to frighten the system. Daniel looked at the dust crystal in my hand. Then he looked down to the black surface beneath our feet. Thousands of pale lights moved inside the Guardian's body. Most were only energy. One struck the glass from within using a shield. Once, then twice. Daniel drew his sword. Zuko lowered his new spear toward the opening eye. Nami climbed onto Pan, and the 2 spearmen closed around me. I put the harvested crystal away. We are not staying because that thing looks like Haru, I said. We are staying because it knows something the panel doesn't. Daniel struck the broken shield piece at his belt. But the light inside the Guardian stopped tapping. Daniel scraped his sword along his shield. Surround. The light answered with the same private signal. The Keeper of the Dust opened its second eye. The resource dungeon had not given us resurrection. It had given us a reason to find out who was trapped inside it.